day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, March 22nd, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, looking back on the week that was, or maybe the week that will be. Or I guess we could do it monthly or in any other time frame. Virgil, Texas, from the Chapo Trap House, will be here. Also in the program, ostensibly to give us film recommendations for the weekend, a special haunting guest. I'll have to stick around for that. There's a lot of technology involved in this, and we'll have to see if it works.
It's an extraordinary get. Literally an extraordinary.
Also on the program today, Trump reverses decades of U.S. policy on the Golan Heights with a tweet. And counties that hosted 2016 Trump rallies saw a slight 226% increase in hate crimes. And meanwhile, President sues Saturday Night Live, bemoans campus free speech crisis. EU delays Brexit until mid-April. Mississippi governor signs a law outlawing abortion essentially after 6 weeks. Top 2020 contenders pass on the AIPAC conference. And U.S. Marine Chief says border deployments pose a, quote, unacceptable risk to Marine Corps readiness. And in Florida Republicans advance a bill to re-disenfranchise recently enfranchised ex-felons with a modern-day poll tax. And while Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams, could they have any different ideas of how Democrats win? All this and more on today's Majority Report. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Matt is on a special assignment. Where is Matt?
He's out in the desert.
Oh, all right. Great.
On a spiritual journey. He's on a vision quest.
I'm glad to hear that.
He's going to meet the Lizard King.
Okay, they're all going out. Is he really on? He's not at like Burning Man or anything.
He's at Burning Man.
You turn him down just a little bit. And where is Matt?
Phoenix, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Why do we want to document
the
people's
hallways
movements
of all
like
ways?
this?
I don't know. I was just
He's in the
curious. You say
hallways
he's in the
of all
desert.
Is
and I
his
just-
tracker off?
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't have his thing.
I don't know.
So Brendan is on the board, and it's just strap your seatbelts in, folks. Could be a bumpy ride. And Virgil will be with us shortly. Let's start with this. What a way to wake up in the morning. Donald Trump, incidentally, he signed an executive order that Talking Points USA. It's not clear to me exactly what this executive order will do, although it will be problematic. It is just another tool in the arsenal to intimidate universities if it's not a list of potentially treasonous professors or a list devised by folks like Charlie Kirk and other professors there of perhaps campus activists who should be targeted. It will be a nefarious sort of, arrow in the quiver of the right wing's desire to be able to continue on with their racism without anybody criticizing them for being racist. But meanwhile, here's Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth was, excuse me, according to, what's that guy's name? Aaron Rupar. Aaron Rupar. According to Aaron Rupar, who I guess grew up with him, or not grew up with him, but grew up in the same hometown as Pete in the suburbs, knowing that Pete went to Princeton. Here is Aaron Rupar, Pete Hegseth, bemoaning the fact that folks would actually be conscious of their identity, particularly if it was not white in America. Here he is.
Yeah, incredibly well said by the general. What makes America special is that we're an idea. We're a bunch of people with different backgrounds, different skin colors, different orientations, and we all say we're all in for the Declaration and the Constitution, this set of principles that we can be free people that govern ourselves.
I hate to be one of those pedantic guys who talks about history, but at the time that the Declaration and the Constitution were signed, we weren't exactly all, we weren't all in on this. It was an idea, but the idea that, like, all of us, didn't matter what color you were, all there at the signing of the Declaration and the Constitution, he may want to just revisit a history book, but continue.
That's it. That's the social contract of America. If you start to say, no, I'm black, I'm white, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this grievance, I'm that grievance, I'm this identity, that identity first, it all starts to break down because you're not looking at the center of the set of ideas that you shared together.
Americans first, as he said, we've all got the same patch on our shoulder.
Which is where America first comes from. But now you have in universities and high schools, you're telling kids to focus on their background, even.
All right, so there he's concerned that apparently in these schools, these colleges, that people are being told to focus on their background because it takes them away from the central idea of America, which we were all apparently in on at the founding of the country. Now, what's funny about Pete Hegseth is this whole idea of identity. Do we have anything to just let's just go back, take a little trip down memory lane where Pete Hegseth, who's completely devoid of any identity, which of course it's somewhat easier to do when you're white and the dominant force in society is not reminding you that you're not white via government policy or, depending on any given day, maybe just the way that you move through society. But here's Pete Hegseth, never to think about his origins.
And here now with my genealogy results is the host of PBS's Genealogy Roadshow, Joshua Taylor. I'm both excited and mortified.
Totally.
Don't be mortified. There's all sorts of things out there. To start your family, we actually work with the 1940 census, which is a great place for anybody out there to start researching their family. And we found your grandparents living in Minnesota.
Yep.
I can tell you
Where'd
are.
you find that document?
That document is online in multiple places, so you can use commercial sites like Ancestry and Family Search.
Okay.
So from that document, it told us that your family has some Norwegian ties.
Indeed.
You are 100% Norwegian.
Indeed.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, and so
how did he know that? Yeah. How is that possible?
By playing identity politics.
I guess so.
He's a big-headed dope like other Norwegians.
It gets bandied about, but the idea, when you talk about white privilege, the idea of just saying that we should all be able to walk through society like me, this white Norwegian from Minneapolis, that we should all be able to walk through American society in that way. Wouldn't that be nice if that were the case? But you really, really have to achieve, because I don't pretend to have any sense of the experience of other people as they walk through American society, but I'm aware of my limitations in that regard. Pete Hegseth is not only not aware of his limitations in that regard, he's bathing in it. He's bragging about his lack of awareness of those limitations. But a nice way to start your morning on Fox and Friends. Before we go, I should say, go any further, I want to remind you the Majority Report today is supported by Pitchfork Economics with Nick Hanauer, a weekly podcast that explores why everything you learned in Econ 101 was wrong and why, if we don't get economics right, the pitchforks are coming. Every week on Pitchfork Economics, zillionaire investor Nick Hanauer is joined by some of the world's most original economic thinkers in a convention-busting exploration of who gets what and why in the American economy. Pitchfork Economics explains why a $15 minimum wage is actually good for business, why taxing the rich spurs economic growth, and why a thriving middle class is the primary cause of prosperity. Senator Cory Booker explains why curbing corporate greed could actually be good for corporations and the economy. Historian Yuval Harari explains how those in power use storytelling to shrink your paycheck. And economist Stephanie Kelton scolds Democrats for worrying too much about how we're going to pay for things and not enough about what we need to do. If you want to learn how to make an economy work for all Americans, not just the wealthy few, subscribe to Pitchfork Economics at pitchforkeconomics.com or wherever you get and then subsequently listen to your podcast, Pitchfork Economics. Ladies and gentlemen, now in studio at the microphone with us, it is a great pleasure to welcome back to the program Virgil, Texas, of the Chapo Trap House.
Trap House, yes. Thank you for having me, Sim. By the way, that's an interesting podcast, Pitchfork Economics. They're pretty good, except they gave Capital Volume 1 only 5 stars
Oh, is that right?
out of 10. So.
Wow. Is that absolutely true?
Is that actually true?
That I'm riffing on the idea like it's Pitchfork, the website.
Are you
They
familiar
don't
with
use
Pitchfork,
stars on
Sam?
Pitchfork.
Yes,
Come
they
on.
do.
When
It's
did
like
they
a
do
Oh
five.
no,
stars
you're
on
right.
Pitchfork?
It's just like
It's
number
a
out of
100-point
10.
scale.
No, it's a 10-point scale.
Yes, but you have like 5.5,
But do they do
whatever.
stars on
That makes it
Pitchfork?
100 points.
I thought they didn't do stars on Pitchfork.
They
Oh,
don't.
jeez, this is
I'm
all falling
sorry.
apart.
I'm
Should
not
I
even-
go? Should I
Wow.
go?
I'm not even.
You
I'm
know,
not even.
wow,
Stars
just gotta-
this joke.
Virgil,
I'm not even
that was-
aware
that
of what
was a
Pitchfork
tough
is.
out the gate. You got cultural literacy to the
Yeah.
left.
No,
and
I didn't know. Is
wrong
that a
analogy
cultural
to the
reference?
Right.
I got
Tough
this. Well, I
stuff.
got this whole episode to regain my
You'll be
stride.
back,
You
you'll
know,
be back.
it's not a sprint. It's a marathon.
You're a
That's right.
returning
you know,
champ.
it's like, is Liz Warren done? We'll see.
Pretty much.
There
They'll
you
be
go.
very
Well, that is a
separate.
good
You'll be
question.
back.
That actually brings us maybe to the one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about was to look at the 2020. We're now basically all in. We're at the same point in the election cycle where we were in 2016 with Joe Biden, who's the last, I think, big contender that people anticipate to jump into the race. We're at the same stage where we were in 2016 when Joe Biden was floating the idea that he was going to jump into the race and show Elizabeth Warren and pick Elizabeth Warren as the VP. Brendan, will you put that up? Joe Biden's done this before, where he basically says, he announces to everyone, hey, I'm totally aware of my weakness as a presidential candidate. I know I'm weak on certain politics, and I'm weak in terms of on gender issues. And in 2016, he knew that his weakness was, I think specifically his relationship with the banks, right? And on gender issues. And so he floated the idea of Elizabeth Warren as his VP, contemplating that he might jump into the race at one point. They had meetings. I don't know if you remember all that. You don't remember that?
I don't remember the meetings. I remember the floating.
There
I
was
did
there,
not
there was
rem-
like
I
a
actually,
big
I've
meeting.
always thought of them as sort of fairly developed political enemies.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
I
And-
remember the meetings. They were very productive from my point of view.
Yeah.
There
But-
you go.
So we
See,
seen Joe.
marathon, not
We
a
seen
sprint,
Joe
folks.
Biden do this with Stacey Abrams. Give me your sense of what's going on here with that.
But whether that he's playing the Hamlet act again, or or how what his game plan.
What his game
because,
plan
because obviously we don't know, but from what I've read, they're considering these out of left field ideas, which is very strange for a guy who's polling at the top right now. Maybe their presumption is that, well, we just by looking at the numbers, we're best positioned to be the nominee to win this thing, but we think, as I think that's these numbers are ethereal. They're going to vaporize like they did for Joe Lieberman, who at this point was polling at 50%.
Right.
And that's, probably just all name recognition at that point.
Right. I think there's got to be a huge name recognition. And people have not seen him campaign in really, as a presidential candidate in 16 years.
I actually
Wait,
have...
is that true? No.
8
years.
8 years.
10 years.
10 years. 8 or 10 years.
I actually have no idea where this idea that Joe Biden is a great campaigner comes from. I maybe that's the case, but I don't remember that being the case when he ran for president in 2008.
His numbers would not indicate that he was a great.
There is a middle position. If we're just talking about him as a campaigner, politics are trash. But I think that, like the caller from Scranton the other day, to this show, and it was fun to literally have a caller from Scranton that could back your point. I think it's somewhere in between. I think some of it will evaporate because his record is horrible by any metric. But I think, he does have a certain type of charm, which I think is like, I would imagine in this audience, tons of Bernie people, a good amount of Warren people, probably even some Beto people with that sort of Gen X version of sort of empty rhetoric. But I think Biden is exactly the type of person that people like us will totally not get, but there is actually a market for it.
Well, of course, there's some market for it.
But not a Lieberman like total implosion style.
But is this market defined by geography? Is it defined by racial identity, by working class identity? No, it's defined by age. But the story about Biden is, he's the white working class whisperer.
That's
right?
wrong.
He was supposed to get these white working class voters who were skeptical of Obama.
Right. That was I think on some level, I think that was, I think there was maybe some accuracy to that. That I think that the idea that he provided some ballast to that concern probably was probably the case.
I don't know if that's the case because, for one, I don't think the vice presidential pick ever matters.
I don't think it matters, but I do think that I don't think it matters in terms of getting votes, but it does. It matters, I think, in terms of creating narratives. Like I think that Sarah Palin, for instance, with John McCain, I think that it in many respects made it impossible for him to get the drubbing that he was going to get if he hadn't picked Palin, but it also made it impossible for him to win the election. Like it did both.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And I don't know what the academic literature says. I would probably gravitate just, after watching the past few years to the former interpretation that was the necessary ballast that kept McCain afloat, a guy who was not really liked by his base, not even that much so liked by the establishment. But I want to wheel back to your original question here. One of the things that I've seen reported from, Biden's campaign staff is they're mooting the idea of picking a running mate before the primary start, which is very baffling to me as a guy who, polls as the front runner, because that is, of course, what Ted Cruz did right before his, campaign ended.
Right. It is a desperate act. That's why
that's a Hail Mary.
That's why I don't think it's anything other than an advertisement to his weaknesses. And I also think that it's like, pretending that he may do the pick and pretending that he's looking at Stacey Abrams, I think is really just his way of signaling, like, he is trying to deal with his liabilities before he enters to the race, which is a smart thing to do, right?
Well, that's what Warren is in 2016.
That's
what
exactly
are they gonna hit me most with. Things like the bankruptcy bill.
That's exactly.
Hey, Elizabeth, can you have lunch?
Right. That's exactly what I was saying. His weaknesses were on gender and on banking, and so I meet with a woman who is very strong on banking, and in this instance, I think he perceives himself as having issues on gender and on race and on the idea of mobilization, because Stacey Abrams is all about mobilization, whereas Joe Biden's supposedly about, I can convince these Trump voters to come back to the Democratic Party or something.
Also a segregation, desegregation split difference there as well.
It's I honestly I can talk probably the least about Biden because I just reflexively ignore every news article about him.
Right.
I'm of the mindset that fuck this isn't fun or interesting. Just run already. And as Matt put it to me the other day, let's see if the majority of Democrats actually do want to embrace oblivion right now.
Right. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
I do think that he probably does also have a floor. I think it's probably like a third of what he's polling at. Maybe it's a little bit lower even than that.
He's in the race. Like, he's firmly there. He can't really be forced out. But I think if he experiences a media environment that is so totally hostile to him, which I think he will. I think he'll get the scrutiny that Hillary Clinton did not receive in 2016 from the friendly liberal sources. I feel like that's just going to suck up all the oxygen he would need.
So in that, I don't know if I would call it, in that lane, but sort of around that lane, I think Beto O'Rourke announced this week that he raised $6.1 million in 24 hours in a weirdly in unique contributions versus unique contributors, which is sort of an odd, weird thing to present in terms of like a statistic, because really it's like you want who in the first 24 hours is repeatedly donating. That's weird.
Yeah, are you implying that he asked people to structure their donations?
I don't know what is. It's not that I'm implying anything. It's that there's an implication, I think, to saying unique contributions as opposed to donors, right? Like,
sure.
Because when most people come out and announce, I don't think there's anything nefarious. I don't think they have some type of bot, but it's just a weird thing to do, because when most people come out, and maybe he's just doing it so that, I don't know, people like me say, why did you say contributions? And then they come out and go, oh, okay, contributors, same number. It's quite possible that was part of it, but it's a weird thing to do. Nevertheless, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of people tried to spend a lot of time parsing that Beto email, just because, well, he ostensibly topped Bernie by $200,000.
Right.
And I mean, that's self-reported. We could find out at the first quarterly reports when they come in that, he just lied.
Right.
Or that includes like $1 million transfer from his Senate campaign.
There's some people who speculate the reason why Biden is waiting is to get past the first quarter reporting deadline so that he can maybe fudge the numbers a little bit until he actually has to report, because they're playing some type of like narrative about. But let me ask you this, just more broadly, and then I want to get back to Beto. Does this matter as much as it used to? Because it used to be, we're going to announce our fundraising because this is a way of signaling to other moneyed people, like, give us money. It's not a bad investment. I'm not going to be dropping out of the race in 3 weeks, and the money that you're giving me is not to pay for bills that I expended 6 months ago.
I mean, it matters in the sense that you need enough to keep the lights on. And it also depends on what your overall strategy is going to be. Keep this in mind. We don't know when the New Hampshire primary is going to be. I'm not sure they've even fixed the date of the Iowa caucus. And a lot of states, including, New York State, they require an act of legislature to fix the date of their primary. We don't know what the schedule is. And we could be in a case where I believe California moved up their date.
They did.
So that while people are caucusing in Iowa, people are mailing in ballots simultaneously in California. Early voting period has already begun. And if you want to compete, you can with a few $1 million, you can compete in a place like Iowa. You can't compete in a place like California.
Right.
No, is that really the case? I didn't realize that they had not set the date yet for Democrats, because I feel like they've set the date for California, which is on Super Tuesday.
Yeah, I believe they moved that up.
Right. It's on Super Tuesday. California is now part of Super Tuesday with Texas, South Carolina. No, it's not South Carolina. Texas. Well, Texas and California are the big ones, and then I think there's like 5 other states maybe.
So the first 4 are fixed: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. They're fixed in that order, though I think Nevada, South Carolina are swapped. But the exact days, I believe, are not fixed. And New Hampshire, of course, has to be the first primary, so they have to wait for everyone else to settle their calendar before they do it.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, but nevertheless, that's the order in which goes. But we know generally where it's going to be. It's going to be in the first couple of months of I guess conceivably Iowa could be, at the end of this year. But we know there's going to be the first couple of months of 2019. And the time that people have to spend in there. I mean, I guess my point is there used to be this other primary, right? The donor primary.
Yeah.
And that to me seems less relevant because the way that small donors are impacting these races.
Well, keep in mind when we're talking, when we talk about the invisible primary right now, we are pretty much just talking about this as a kind of crypto poll measure of what small donors believe in the party, of what the base believes in the party. When we really only started talking about this stuff in 2004, right? That's when it was the big obsession. How much money Howard Dean was raising. Right. Remember the frickin' baseball bat?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He carried that thing around.
And that was like the thermometer.
That was the thermometer online. That was the very first thermometer to be online.
I also think, I think that was the beginning of it. And I think really clearly now, like in this cycle, it obviously, we're talking about the enthusiasm of smaller donors. So it's not just the raw number. Like if Biden comes out and kills it, and it is clearly without, individual donations versus unique donations, it's just, no, this guy got like a bunch of, oligarchs to max out. That's not necessarily a great news cycle for him.
Well, he's going to come out and he's going to say his numbers, and he may not give a full accounting.
Right,
he's going to say this stuff is not as important. I don't care about
sure.
money.
For sure. But I'm saying that was never a question.
So
before.
Also
as far as I can find online, Iowa caucuses are Monday, February 3rd. New Hampshire's Tuesday, February 11th. Nevada's February 22nd. South Carolina is the 29th. And then Super Tuesday comes with California, Texas, Massachusetts, Alabama, North Carolina, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Vermont and Virginia. So that's
and that's March, beginning of March.
And that is literally March 3rd. And so California is huge. These are you need a lot of money to stay in the race and to compete after March 3rd. Like presumably, right, a bunch of people drop out after Super Tuesday, or they just move into I'm on book tour mode.
Basically, a lot of people are the field was going to winnow out after the first, the 4 tiny states.
And part of but the other dynamic that's different, let's say, from when the Republicans were running with so many different people. Or we should get back to Beto for a second. So, Beto, what is your sense about Beto's appeal and who will reach?
I mean, he's young and toothsome, which is about all I can say about him. And he
definitely got teeth.
He intimates that he is, he's a fresh, new kind of politics. He would be the first, unequivocally Gen X president. That's about all I can say about him.
I saw a headline that looked like something out of The Onion, but it was real on Stereogum. I believe it said, Beto promises to reunite the Mars Volta if elected president.
I think that if you just, I'm simplifying here, but if you take the premise that the main argument inside the Democratic Party is between people who understand that Trump is a threat and a crisis and he needs to be defeated, and then there's bigger long-term structural crises that we also need to confront and deal with, and you could argue to the degree, whether it's a crisis of capitalism, which I think, or even just a kind of Keynesian argument about inequality, that's fine, versus the element of the resistance that is really just purely Trump-centric. And I think Beto is the distillation of that perspective. I mean, even this morning I just caught praising John McCain. He is the fulfillment of the I don't want to think about politics. I just want to get back to HBO Go and have a nice guy in the White House sentiment. And so it's total call for normalcy amongst a group of people that I think are generally just not committed to the broader struggles and dynamics.
Well, those people are split, though, right, between Beto and Biden, because all these folks just want Obama to be president again, right? They want to return to normalcy. And it's do you want the guy who is friends with Obama, or do you want the guy who's a copy of a copy of a copy of a young Obama?
But the weird part is that there's also polling that shows that Bernie shares a lot of the supporters, a second choice type of situation with Beto. And there's and I mentioned this the other day, but I'll cite it again. Josh Marshall got a letter from Mark Hetherington, who apparently, Heather Ringtone, who wrote a book with Jonathan Weiler, who was one of our early guests on here talking about authoritarianism maybe 5 years ago. I don't know. I can't remember when that was. But and one of the things he says that our research suggests, you might be thinking, he writes, you might be thinking about Beto's potential base of support. You might not be thinking about his potential base of support in the right way. Those of us who follow politics closely always tend to think about the world in terms of ideology, but decades of research in political science suggest that most people do not think in ideological terms, and that our research suggests that something's more fundamental, what we call worldview. Those who supported Sanders have a worldview that values niche things over mainstream things. They stream rather than using cable. They drive hybrids rather than gas-powered cars. They like underdogs and are repelled by the establishment. This crowd not only voted for Sanders in 2016, it voted for Obama in 2008 and Bradley in 2000. Yep. For reasons that have nothing to do with ideology, we think they're going to love Beto in 2020. He's niche. He's not establishment. And from this perspective, he thinks this is what's going to devastate Sanders' candidacy. What's your sense of that?
I don't buy it. Because for one, just from what I've gathered from hearing Beto over the past few days, like this is very empty pandering. There's not a lot there. Bernie has the advantage, and Warren shares this advantage, I think, of having compiled a long record of taking one side in one at least one specific fight, and of being associated in the public imagination, and especially to the Democratic base, with that fight. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you think Liz Warren is Wall Street.
Yep. But even but specifically to your point.
Well, wait. Your argument is that authenticity in that respect, right? I mean, this is
my thing is I agree with the premise that the median Democratic voter is not engaged in an ideological struggle for the heart and soul of the party, and anything like that. They have a series of concerns that they want addressed. They have a kind of a bullshit quotient. They will sense that, like anyone, they don't want to be pandered to. They will be repelled if they feel that somebody is dissembling to them. So, yeah, I would say that if your average voter is essentially comparing brands in a supermarket here, then, yes, authenticity is a brand.
Well, don't forget, Beto is a white guy. So he will probably appeal to that slice of Bernie bros who wants to keep a woman and or minority from winning at all costs.
Which is, of course, most of us. But I think the point that I want to say specifically to that number, which I think, or their argument, which I also don't buy, and it's because, and this is anecdotal, but it's like when he's running against Ted Cruz in Texas and he's on a skateboard and he's occasionally making the right noises about Kaepernick, that is a novelty. In a Democratic primary against Sanders and Warren, saying sort of generic third-way claptrap, that novelty quickly wears off.
And interestingly, I think Kamala Harris and her team realized this very early on, which is why they're aggressively staking out these left positions and often niche left positions.
Right. Give me an example of what you're talking about.
She, for one, is one of the candidates boycotting AIPAC right now.
That's a huge
AIPAC
pivot.
She
that's a 180.
Came out for drug legalization, ostensibly said sex work decriminalization, but that's arguable. But still, it's not something you would have expected from her, and especially it's not something she ever in a million years would have said in any of her prior races.
Right, and that's also her trying to sort of like build some type of firewall against her record as a prosecutor, right? I mean, like she has a specific sort of issue set where she has some liability, particularly, with a guy like, let's say, Cory Booker in the race, who has his issue in the same way that, you can say Banks for Elizabeth Warren, you could say criminal justice reform, I guess, for Cory Booker, and I would also say charter schools.
And that's smart for a certain kind of voter who thinks, maybe criminal justice reform is not their priority, but they can't ignore it, and they know that this is a great moral stain
it's a signifier.
on the country, and they want to hear something about that. Maybe they're not going to, maybe they're not so motivated that other candidates if they ran attack ads on Kamala Harris about her time as AG, maybe that's not really going to stick because it's not a priority, but they still want to hear something about it and something more than just a bromide about, oh, we got to do something. I
think too that one of the things that I don't know if you've heard much out of that book by John Sides, was it Identity Crisis? There were two other authors, but we interviewed John Sides, so I can't remember the other two authors, I think. But one of the things that happened during the Obama years was, and then the subsequent Trump years, the most amazing statistic that comes out of that, I keep repeating it, 50% of white non-college educated voters thought the Republicans were to the left of Democrats on race as late as the aughts. And then Barack Obama got elected, and they were like, wait a second.
You're not to the left
I can't believe, what did the Democrats do that they elected a black president? So everybody, people got very highly, a lot of political issues got very racialized during the Obama years. And then, of course, they've gotten even more racialized during the Trump years. And it's gone both ways. White voters have seen, have moved. There's been polarization on race. And so when Kamala Harris is criticized about things like poo-pooing criminal justice reform, that becomes sort of associated with race. And I mean, it's obviously because it's also a racial issue. I suspect that there's a lot going on there in terms of like signifying not just to, signifying to the broad Democratic Party coalition who sees, obviously that as a racial justice issue. Is big there. But so what else sticks out for you at this point? Like where is there any other candidates that are doing stuff that surprises you as to what positions they're taking?
I've got to think about it because a few more white guys have jumped in, and it's a few too many for me to keep track of at this point. I read the other day that Michael Bennett is thinking about getting in.
Where does he squeeze in, or is he just like,
I don't know.
I'm going to do this I'm going to get HUD or something. I feel like everybody who jumps into it, I feel like everybody who does that.
Bill de Blasio keeps insisting that he's going to run for president.
Matt and I were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about it in terms of the debates because they're going to have the first debate, and they're going to have two debates chosen by lot, but there's a max of 10, on each stage. So even if you qualify for that debate, you can still be squeezed out because they'll have to use some kind of metric to trim the list.
How many donations you get is my understanding. Is the metric.
Yes, how many individual donors you have and/or polling data,
right.
I believe is what they're going with right now. And I said and Matt thinks, Matt thought, well, we could get to 20. And I said, nah, I don't think that's going to be the case. Now I'm like, we could get to 25.
Right. I mean, well, the bar to entry drops the more people who enter.
Pretty, I guess, but I mean, it also sucks up a lot of oxygen in the room because there's another white guy in Colorado running.
But that's
too many.
Yes, but
also I've talked to people in Colorado and they hate Michael Bennett. The thing is, I haven't done a deep dive into Michael Bennett or Hickenlooper because I just don't have time to.
Right.
I've got records to listen to.
Yeah, of course. And
I haven't even heard of Michael Bennett, so excuse my ignorance.
He's kind of like Ned Flanders in The Simpsons.
He got pissed off at Ted Cruz on the
Senate
floor a few weeks
got
ago.
pissed at Ted Cruz. Very boring.
All right. Well,
Doesn't
who
have
I
much of a
have heard
face.
of is this Mike Gravel fellow. Do you have
Gravel.
any Gravel? Oh, do you have any insider knowledge you can share about that, Virgil?
Not really. Not really. Not more than you probably know.
He's obviously the best, fun candidate.
Well,
I'm not a Yang cuck. I'm Gravel Gang.
Like these teenagers, did they hack his Twitter account or what? They're Chapo. They're confirmed Chapo listeners.
Yeah,
right?
they are fans of the show. I believe they're teens from Westchester, and they Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's neighbors, and they are fans of the show. And I guess they heard one of us talk about Mike Gravel or just allude to Mike Gravel. We didn't do like a Mike Gravel deep dive or anything. And they, looked into the guy and thought, he sounds great. And I guess they called him up and said, will you run for president, Grandpa? And he said, well, all right, sure.
So he handed over his Twitter willingly.
I mean, I assume they made it for him, but he's giving it his blessing.
Wow. How does that feel for you, man, knowing that you might directly influence some ideas on the debate stage?
I mean, I don't know if he'll actually be in a debate. Could he get 65,000 individual donors? I mean, I'll donate, sure.
Well, how many people are listening to this show right now? That's the start, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah.
How many people listen to Chapo Trap House? That's a good start.
I guess. I don't know what he would say, though, because he's, been out of the public eye for 10 years.
And then when he was he was out of the public eye for about another dozen to 20 years prior to that.
That's the thing about it. In 2008, I remember him in these debates, and
Yeah.
people have been sharing clips, especially when you're talking about foreign policy in the Iraq War, where every single other person on that stage, perhaps with the exception of Dennis Kucinich, essentially had a view that was identical to John McCain's in terms of Iraq policy. I would say that at the end of that race, October. In the presidential debates in the fall between McCain and Obama, neither of them was saying anything that was substantially different from the other.
Well, I mean, to be fair, and I don't know that it's really, I mean, I don't. This is not stuff that you brag about, I think, if you're Obama, but he specifically wanted to draw down from Iraq to rebolster the Afghanistan war. I mean, that was basically what he was running on. Was we draw down from Iraq, we go back to the one that we should have been fighting in the first place in Afghanistan. It didn't work out, but he was just basically right surge, wrong country. Was his. But
at that point, and I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get too bogged down on this because I only kind of half remember it. At that point, hadn't both of the candidates implicitly accepted the premise that, the surge was good and it worked, and we're basically on our way out now? Well, it's the idea that, the Iraqi army will stand up while we stand down.
The argument was between the emphasis of whether it was the surge or this thing that they called the Sunni awakening, which is the sort of very melodramatic way of putting it. So the argument was literally between, do we praise Petraeus for surging troops and doing really aggressive counterinsurgency, and of course no mention of any type of civilian casualties, or is it all just that we bought these people off?
It was payments.
Right. Literally, we paid off these tribal, and then basically when we left, because there was no framework for that to be durable, they ended up just getting screwed by a new government, and those remnants went into ISIS. But the argument, I think the bigger point, I think the details were important at the time, but I think the bigger point you're trying to make is true, which is that there was no argument on the table of this is sort of structurally wrong that we're doing. It was just, which is the right way to administer an imperial adventure? And then, we need to get out of there to go to Afghanistan.
You're describing, and I think you key into it, you're describing that the main conflict was about emphasis there.
Yes.
But everyone had accepted the premise that, we're not going to leave tomorrow. We have commitments there.
Obama had a line. So the only thing worse than getting into Iraq foolishly is getting out too foolishly.
Right. Which is, I'm sorry, it's substantially the same thing that your median Republican politician was calling for as well. And Mike Gravel was the only one on stage that says, no, we should go tomorrow. Right. The only thing worse than someone dying for lost cause is someone else dying for lost cause.
Right. And I think
but my original point there was that Mike Gravel was, as morally correct as he was, he kind of still sounded halfway incoherent 10 years ago, from my recollection.
Yes, I think, I don't think it would be doing him a service necessarily to have him out politicking at this point. But
that's what happens when Matt Christman is too cowardly to do that job himself.
I agree, but here's the thing. I agree that about the coward Matt Crispin, absolutely. But here's the thing: as we said, they're limiting that debate stage to 20 people.
Right.
So someone like Andrew Yang, who claims to have passed this, utterly arbitrary, DNC test to get in the debates, could still, by the rules that they've set already, be limited from the debate stage, be kicked off.
He could be kicked off.
Well, if there's 20 other people in front of him, yes, by the rules that they've set out.
Okay.
But as well, keep this in mind, a DNC press release isn't a binding contract.
Well, that's right. I mean, the only hold they have over the candidates are if you participate in a rival debate. Like if 5 of you set up on others, the only thing that we can do is lock you out of the official ones.
They can lock
Stay out of the circumcision forum on
right.
Twitter.
I mean, in other words,
they can lock you out of the debate just by saying we lock you out of the debate. That's it.
No, I understand that, but usually what happens is, I mean, certainly this is what happened in 2016 was if you go to any other forum to debate, if you agree to debate in any other forum, you will be barred from participating in our sanctioned debates. All right, well, let me ask you this. How much will the debates matter if there are 10 people on a stage? Because you're talking, I mean, let's say it's 120 minutes, and then, maybe 20 of those minutes are tied up in questions, right, as a minimum. And I mean, you're talking about 8 minutes per candidate or something like that over the course of 2 hours.
Do these debates ever really matter that much?
And not unless somebody totally screws up, I feel.
It's what
they matter. It's like the vice presidency. They matter in the negative.
Don't you think they mattered for Trump?
Last time around, yeah. I'm trying to seriously consider the premise. That wasn't a leading question or anything. And
I think yes.
I would say so, but it mattered not for what was the entire 120 minutes of it. It's just a handful of specific clashes and encounters that express something that's unsaid.
Right. Yeah, I think
that get to the subtext of all the falsity of this, and that's what Bernie did in 16. That's what Trump did in 16.
I think in primaries in particular, I think they make a big difference, and because you have much more engaged electorate, and they're looking for, I mean, theoretically, right? They may not be looking for the ideological granularity, but they're looking for more granularity than I think people are looking at debates in the general election, which is just like good or bad. This one has, I think, at least some measure of nuance. But here's my point: is that Bernie was able to do what he was able to do in those debates, despite the fact that they were on at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night or something, because there was 3 people on stage, or maybe at worst, at the most it was 5, right? Yep. When Webb and Chafee and Martin O'Malley, and it was so clear that Clinton and Sanders were going to be the two at the end of this race, even early on, that the questions were focused there. Now you're going to have a situation where Bernie and Warren, let's say, are going to have a tougher time, it seems to me, making these stark comparisons.
Keep this in mind. Bernie had ample time when the debates were 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 to lay out his case, lay out his vision of America, lay out what distinguishes him from Hillary Clinton. He still lost. It's like just having more time and the time to yourself isn't some guarantee that you're going to win or anything.
Oh no,
like that.
Of course not. But I'm saying to the extent that Beto is is inauthentic and does not have policies. Can you find that out when he could get away with talking for 4 minutes?
Well, won't that be the chain of the debate? Like I think an advantage on the other hand that Sanders and Warren might have is that all of the center candidates will go at each other. Beto will try to fly above, and then if they coordinate it correctly, Sanders and Warren can both be like, dude, what about the trade votes? What about the banking votes? What about this, and this?
Do you think
keep in mind these are going?
I think the centrists might do that to Beto too, frankly, because they're trying to pivot left.
But keep in mind, these debate stages will be decided by lot,
right?
So we don't know who's going to be on the stage. It could be you could have a stage that's Beto and 9 also-rans who are all polling at 1%.
That's crazy.
That would be good for Beto.
Well, I mean, that would be tough to imagine.
It could be great. I'd love to see. This could make just remarkable, ridiculous exchanges. We can get that great side-by-side image of Bernie Sanders and Marianne Williamson having it out over
what visualize your way to social justice.
What do you think?
She's reading everyone's chakras.
What do you think Bernie's challenge is at this point?
Chakras.
I'm seeing his favorability ratings are not obviously what they were at the end of 2016. That there's a lot of different reasons why that could be the case, there's some theory. I guess Harry Enton, although Harry Enton, was a little skeptical of in 2016 when we were talking about. He was at he was at that point at 538, I think, and.
Harry lately has seemed to be going more and more in the pundit direction. Yeah. He's been
a little bit less numbery.
Yeah, a little bit more of just like extrapolating from one data point, which is the kind of thing he would have really lectured you about doing 4 years ago.
Right. There is, I get that sense, and there is some of that. He has some, but the implication is, and it also he thinks Biden is going to have a problem with this too, was that. He does better when he's not considered a major threat to win.
That underdog impulse you're talking about.
Right. Which I think is probably true of a lot of people.
Here's the thing, but because this race, there are so many people in this race, and there are at least a half dozen people I can credibly see at the end of this race, I kind of don't think there's ever going to be a point where he looks like this unstoppable juggernaut.
Okay.
And as well, there's always going to be a point where, like, if it seems like he's getting close to that, there will be a Stop Bernie movement.
All right. So that brings up the question I've been waiting to ask all day. Half a dozen people who could be in at this race at the end. Unlike the Republican Party, we do not have a winner-take-all in terms of the delegates. So. Virtually every state you come out of, you're going to have a distribution of the delegates that are going to go to people. That'll probably be, I mean, who knows what that distribution is going to be? But if you have 6 people at the end of the race, one can imagine what that distribution of delegates is going to be. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to be even close to getting half the delegates. Nobody's going to be even close.
There are vagaries in the way that this is decided. It's almost like a mini electoral college in some states. For instance, in certain states, it's not just going to be, you get 40% of the vote, you get 40% of the delegates, right?
That's right.
Often it's cases like they're allocated by congressional district.
Right. There's variations there. But nevertheless, the chances of anybody getting even close to 50% plus one seem to me to be extremely remote.
So I have kind of a long answer to this because I've thought about this for a bit. First off, to wheel back to the core question here, Bernie has a unique challenge. Every candidate has just a basic organizational challenge, and he seems very well positioned to overcome that right now. His core challenge is basically the same one that he had in 2016, which is winning over black voters. He did not. He got absolutely destroyed in the South Carolina primary. It was the third after he almost swept Iowa and New Hampshire. He is destroyed by this totally lopsided margin there. What was it? It was like 80-20, something.
Right. He
got
rolled.
70-30, I think it was the actual number.
And I'm sorry, you can't really win the nomination in today if that's how you're doing with black voters. And he knows that. That's why right out of the gate, he's making these aggressive appeals to African American primary voters. It remains to be seen how well that will go. You might be an optimist or a pessimist about it, but I don't think we're in a position where that's comparable to, say, 1972, or I think 1988 was much the same, where there was a black candidate who won in these states where at that point there was a substantial number of black Democratic primary voters. Thereby, but did not really win anywhere else. I'm talking about Jesse Jackson or Shirley Chisholm. So that's the first challenge. And the other one is, it is the plurality voting system, the allocation system. Because the agreement that the DNC made in that Unity Commission thing after 2016 really did not help Bernie at all. All it said was superdelegates don't count on the first ballot. That's it.
Right.
Well, okay. Now he has to win a majority of pledged delegates, which means winning something pretty damn close to a majority of the popular vote overall, irrespective of how many opponents he has.
A majority of the popular vote, not the plurality, right? I mean, the majority of the popular vote.
Or as close to it as possible, considering the vagaries and the fact that there are still a couple caucuses left.
And it seems to me, I mean, I can see the Warren delegates, assuming she has, how many delegates she has, at the convention, voting for Bernie. But it's very hard for me to see a lot of delegates. I mean, I can see people voting, people who will be Bernie friendly voting for Beto, let's say, or Bernie friendly voting for other candidates. But the delegates are going to be inclined to be, I think that it's very hard for me to imagine that those other delegates who are not, like you say, are not going to congeal around another sort of like not Bernie candidate at that point, right? And so like, give me an idea of what you've thought about in terms of these scenarios.
Basically, he has to win this by a substantial margin. It can't look close.
Right.
He can't be one of the two in at the end of the 2008 primary where the Hillary Clinton campaign says, well, there's an argument to be made that she actually won the popular vote overall. He can't be bogged down in that because he's going to lose that because the machinery of the party is opposed to him.
How big a margin you think though? Like, let's put
I don't know, but I mean, it's. Yeah. I mean, if he won 50 and nobody is close to that, then sure,
50.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be some in between number that we stake in terms of like building legitimacy on that argument. I just want to say, I know I always say this, but this is really important. I mean, it goes without saying, he needs to do well. And frankly, everybody, if you want to win a Democratic primary or become president as a Democrat, needs to do incredibly well. And not only with African-American voters, but actually deliver materially for African-American voters, we should add. But, there is not a monolithic African-American vote. And I think, it might just be the case. Like, he needs to significantly do better in South Carolina, but South Carolina across the board is represented by, relatively speaking, more conservative Democrats. And again, he needs to do better, but we did see last time that when you got to the industrial Midwest, those margins got a lot tighter, and that isn't just because he was more exposed. That's also because you're talking about a different political tradition. And I think we need to start really disaggregating, like, religious-oriented politics of South Carolina versus a labor-oriented politics of Milwaukee as an example. And simultaneously, he needs to do way better, but there's still going to be a tough road to hoe in a place like South Carolina, and there isn't a monolithic one-dimensional vote. It's a very complex demographic like any other.
Right, and as well, I don't mean to imply that the black vote will go to black candidates. Obviously,
no. I mean, no. Of course, I mean, my read is that South Carolina, and I think probably this does work fairly well to Bernie. I'm not convinced. I don't think he will win South Carolina, frankly, but I don't see
he could.
He could. Well, that's the thing.
Keep it also in mind.
He's in
open
play.
Primary.
He certainly could, and I think that yes, that could go. South Carolina is a state where I think you could tick off 5 or 6 people that I would think Biden could win it, Beto could win it, Harris could win it, Booker could win it, Sanders could win it. Those are all totally smart, legitimate picks as of the information we have now.
The other thing is, a lot of the talk has been about exactly what we're saying right now, that this could be a contested convention, that when the dust settles, there could be 3 or more candidates still standing with a substantial delegate count. That's just kind of the thing we're just fantasizing about. It could also be a situation where one candidate does extremely well in the early states, does extremely well in Super Tuesday, and becomes unstoppable.
Right.
So here's a question about that then, because when you say there's going to be a Stop Bernie campaign, that's obviously a reference to the Stop McGovern campaign that they had in 1972. And people like to compare Bernie to McGovern in a lot of different ways.
That's the argument they'll make.
Despite the fact that, in many ways, the social forces have shifted significantly since the 70s. I mean, McGovern did not have a problem with black voters. He had a problem with white working class voters. And he was totally abandoned by organized labor.
Yeah.
But McGovern was able
more than abandoned. They worked against him, I think.
Yeah.
Well, he had worked against them in the Senate, to be fair.
He was an extremely pro-labor candidate, and they still hated him because, well, lots of reasons, but he was against the Vietnam War for one. But given the obstacles that Bernie faces right now, McGovern was able to surmount the Stop McGovern campaign, and then he lost horribly in the general. But do you think there are any lessons that we can take from that for how to surmount any kind of Stop Bernie campaign that arises?
I mean, I don't know, because I mean, these things they're out of our hands, basically. I mean, we can take the immediate example of the Stop Trump campaign, the Never Trump people who just embarrass themselves. I mean, the thing is, what was out of the Never Trump people's hands was the fact that there were 2 Never Trump candidates in the race at that point. So, I mean, Bernie's best case scenario is, and he's, he won the New Hampshire primary by a landslide last time around, and he almost won the Iowa caucus, is to win both and then post substantial margins in the Super Tuesday primaries, maybe, do well or limit his losses in South Carolina. And just by virtue of that, look good enough to the voters in the remaining states. The second best scenario is he does some version of that. He does pretty well enough to be clearly ahead in the delegate counts, perhaps even a majority of the pledged delegates up to that point. Not necessarily he's like cleanly running away with this thing, but that there are still like 4 or 5 people still hanging on in this race.
Right. You have like Beto and Biden and Kamala Harris.
Which is why I wanted Bloomberg to run so badly, because he has the money to just stay in the entire time, and he'll never, ever get close to the nomination.
Right. But he will be there to just siphon off voters who would never, ever, ever vote for Bernie. And if they were going to vote for Bloomberg, they're not going to vote for somebody who actually has a chance to win.
I also think a difference just historically is like you didn't have millions of irate people on social media and other distributional nodes of power to freak out about what was happening to McGovern. And he still did, in fact, get the nomination, right? And also, who knows? Maybe Bernie will be so damaged the poll numbers will reverse. But as of now, Bernie's is a very strong general election contender. If I'm right, historically, maybe it wasn't predicted in the polls that he would lose 49 states to 1, but it was already really clear that, like, this doesn't look good in a general election. This is like a lamb to a slaughter type of situation. And I think that makes the calculus, another reason I don't like Bernie supporters building their arguments on electability either. I just think that if one of the reasons is like, oh, Bernie will lose, nothing bears that out in the polling data. And one of the arguments against McGovern was he will lose, which he did.
Yeah, he was up against a popular incumbent at a time when the economy was relatively strong, stronger than it is now. But like, I did see an article the other day.
I don't know. The numbers of the economy are pretty.
Yeah, I don't know. The economy is going to probably tank in the next couple of months.
Well, I did see an article the other day. I don't know how much credence you give it, that said, I think it was in Forbes, that said, all of these short-term economic indicators are strong, and if they stay strong, it's favorable to Trump winning again.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, it's not going to be a walk in the park. I mean, you see even though the president's approval ratings are extremely low, you look at the polling data, and Biden is doing the best, but the best means a 4% margin right now.
Go ahead.
Like, how accurate are the polls at this point in time? Because we've seen polls be very wrong before, and it's very early still right now. So like, and then I see Biden polling as like the front runner. Like, how much should we trust that?
I mean, it doesn't. It has no predictive value, is the thing. It's really just a snapshot in time.
I think that. I think they're accurately capturing probably what it is right now. The question, like you say, it's in terms of predictive. Things get pretty predictive though, pretty quickly. I mean, if you go back and look at 2016, where Donald Trump. I remember we were talking about Donald Trump is up in the polls, and people are like, yeah, he fades. And you go back and you look at Romney. Romney also. I mean, if you, the whoever's in the lead, come out of this summer, 2019, when you start getting around like August of 2019, the numbers you're starting to see are going to have some predictive value. Of course, there's a trend, but it's rare that there's a lot but who knows this year? It could be there could be a lot of fluctuation.
At the end, we don't know what's going to happen. At the end of the day,
yes,
I think that
let's just tell everybody.
I really do like the at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, unless there is some substantial, structural change from here to Election Day, November 2020. I think that what the president gets ultimately in the popular vote, what the Democratic nominee gets, is going to fall within an extremely narrow band.
In terms of, yes.
In terms of the popular vote.
Right. The real question is the electoral vote. Like, we could get that twice in a row, right? That would, let's.
Could very well.
I want to.
You are the presenter of horrible scenarios today.
Well,
Jesus.
I mean,
no, these are plausible. For sure.
I've got loud pipes in.
I mean, nobody should
my
be
apartment.
fantasizing
I wake up at
right
3 in the
now.
morning. I'm not fantasizing.
I mean, nobody should.
Well,
my point is, nobody should be fantasizing that Bernie Sanders will win by like a 10-point margin, which would be a landslide.
Right.
Who is thinking that?
If anybody articulates anything remotely close to that, the first thing I would do is start to hydrate, because you're having some type of episode.
If it's a 4-point margin in any way, that would be amazing.
But there's two scenarios, right? That come up. One is sort of a 1968 type of national, Democratic National Convention type of scenario, right? Like, I mean, things got. I mean, I was at the last convention, and it was, things got a little bit raucous there. Nothing too crazy. Some of I thought the protests were not effective. There was one protest out in front of Radio Row where people literally put tape on their mouths. Pro tip: Radio Row, not the place to do a silent protest. Does not get the kind of coverage you're going to want. This is something you want to do in front of TV cameras, or you do a louder protest in front of Radio Row. But putting that aside, there's the potential for that. And then, we can talk about the Electoral College. Elizabeth Warren brought it up, and I don't think it was. I mean, what do you make of that? Because obviously that's not going to happen, right? The national popular vote compact. That's off the table, at least for 2020. Maybe off the table forever, but
it doesn't make. Well, the thing is, I think about it. The compact. I actually think there's a strong argument to make that it is unconstitutional.
Right.
Even if every individual step, scans, like every individual step is acceptable, the overall thing is unconstitutional.
Right.
And the second part is, what if you are, for this to work, for this to make sense, you would need swing states, what are swing states now, to sign on to it.
Right.
Why would they want to dilute their influence?
Right, of course. And why would not only would they want to dilute their influence, but they're more likely to be dominated by Republicans, or at least have Republicans who have enough power to say, like, wait a second, I don't want to lose.
Right. I mean, maybe if, like, the next time there's the Democrats, control everything in Pennsylvania by a wide margin, they can be strong-armed into doing it. But the other point is, a few candidates are talking about abolishing the Electoral College, but it's a process thing. Nobody cares about a process thing.
But doesn't it signify, though, to a certain extent, a certain amount of partisanship, or a certain amount of, like, I mean, to me, I think it's like it's just a signifier. I mean,
I think I read it right now as a partisanship thing. I don't read it as a willingness to actually want to transform the structure of our governance.
Right.
Which obviously there is a conversation happening about that. So I don't know. Maybe, what all of this boils down to, all of this stuff about when we talk about packing the courts, when we talking about, limiting Supreme Court justice terms, when we talk about abolishing the filibuster, these are all means to an end. And the Democratic Party hasn't, like, fundamentally embraced this notion, and certainly the establishment and the stakeholders do not want to embrace this notion that, yes, the fundamental these structures of governance right now have to be either reformed or destroyed in order to get what we want.
Right. Well, there's going to be two possible flashpoints, it seems to me. That convention, depending on who ends up getting the majority of the delegates on the third vote that they take, a third round of voting or second round of voting, that could get.
And that's also why I say Bernie has to win cleanly, because if he gets 33% of the vote, Kamala Harris is 33% of the vote, and Beto O'Rourke is 33% of the vote, okay, that goes to a contested convention, well, anyone can walk out of there and the party can more or less stay unified. But if Bernie has, won 50% of the popular vote, but still loses on the first ballot and then gets screwed by the superdelegates, like, that's it for the Democratic Party.
Yes, definitely. I agree. I mean, the question is, what if it's in between there? Like I agree with you, and I think it's much harder for them to do it if he gets 50% of the vote,
exactly,
or even 49%, or even 47%, like maybe 48%. But if you start getting into like he got 40% of the vote, as opposed to 33% of the vote, like now we're in this territory where it's like that's where it seems to be could be even the ugliest, because at 50% of the vote, you're going to have a lot of people, even people who are just like, I want the Democratic Party to be unified to defeat Donald Trump. Even if he gets 49%, and I'm not and somebody says, I'm not a Sanders fan, but 49%, that's close enough. Let's keep the Democratic Party unified. But when you get to 40%, that's like, that to me is like, what do you do?
Well, I mean, the thing is, if he's still standing at the end of it and he has a plurality of the pledged delegates, it's going to be hard to deny him the nomination. Even if you can make, some credible argument. We're all just discussing arguments and spin that people will be doing at this time. But if he, if he has the most pledged delegates at the end of this, even without a majority, a substantial number of his support base will be Bernie or bust.
Right, I agree.
But that's when I think honestly, electability is going to come into play, right? That seems like it's going to be a major argument that they're going to be making on both sides.
There's going to be it's at that point, it's just going to be insanity.
No, it's just
I don't think there's going to be anybody making a rational argument.
I would say this. I think that
I hate electability arguments.
I think that there should be, if there is the organizational capacity to do this, that there should be a left ballot line in all 50 states for a presidential candidate that is left open pending the result of the Democratic convention.
Interesting.
So here's a question.
I like that idea.
You said that most people don't vote based on ideology. They vote based on other dumber factors, like how the person seems to them and their vibe. But a lot of the Democratic candidates this time around seem to be making it part of their strategy to move to the left and take up a lot of the things that Bernie was talking about the last time around. Like, are they wrong? Are they partly wrong? Like, how does that track?
Well, the thing is, most people are not going to make up their minds until a week before Election Day. Most people don't know who, virtually all of these candidates are. So that's why, the primary polling data is just, it's irrelevant. It's at this point, it's always been irrelevant. Right now, if you're polling at 2% or you have these obvious liabilities, you've got to start somewhere. You have to do the basic work of politics, which means, putting together a coalition, getting people on your side. And there's plenty of people who are single-issue voters, who are part of organizations like the DSA, for instance, or who have just one, priority, whether that's reproductive rights or gun control or something like that. It's a fair play to say, well, okay, I want to be the gun control candidate. I want to be the climate change candidate.
And those potential voters are really the only ones who are listening right now. Anyway.
Well, yeah, it's not just potential voters,
no, but they're
also
definite voters, but they're potentially
not just potential voters, but also organizations with organizational capacity and money.
Interest groups.
Right.
Yeah.
Those people who, those sort of the low-hanging fruit, the low-hanging fruit, I guess, in terms of where, they're out there, they're shopping themselves around. They want to give in some fashion to a campaign. This is the time where you start to scoop those people up.
And you also want people with credibility in certain fields to be on your side. You want the people who have been agitating for something like a Green New Deal for cutting carbon emissions for several years now and have a lot of money behind that and have a lot of credentials to that front to be on your side and give you cover for these things. Kamala Harris wants people who have been criminal justice reform advocates for their entire lives to be on her side and give her cover.
These are endorsements that the general public's not aware of, but people who are interested in that topic area would have an impact. All right, well, listen, we're going to take a break and head in. We're going to take a break. We have a special guest. You may want to stick around for this.
Okay. I thought I was the special guest.
We have another special guest. We rarely do two special guests on a Friday, but
Usually
this
one
one
special, one unspecial.
what we're gonna do is let's take a break. We're gonna have to dim the lights, and we're going to have to see if we can work this out to see if we have the technology and frankly the spirituality to get our next guest on. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our special guest. We're not going to the fun half.
Oh, fair enough.
We're not going to the fun half. We're going to a special guest right now. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll try and dial this person up. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Our next guest, in some respects, I got the sense that we could. Okay, we don't need. I got the sense that our next guest could come on the show. Frankly, I've been talking about how I've not been sleeping well. This may be part of the reason. Virgil, you probably want to put your headphones on. I'm not sure exactly how you will hear this person, but I don't know if the headphones will make a difference, frankly. But so I've been telling people I have not been sleeping well. Maybe this is part of the reason, but I'd like to. Well, first, do we have a clip of Donald Trump to explicate this? This is yeah. Which one was it? Oh, number 2. Let's play number 2. This is Donald Trump with what was his former friend, Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, on the issue of Senator McCain.
And replace. We would have had great health care.
But Mr. President, he's dead. He can't punch back. I know you punch back, but he's dead.
I don't talk about it. People ask me the question. I didn't bring this up. You just brought it up. You asked the question.
Well, you talked about it this week.
You asked me the question. When I went out yesterday to the scrum, they asked me the question. When they asked me the question, I answered the question. But you people bring it up. I don't bring it up. I'm not a fan. He was horrible what he did with repeal and replace. It was what he did to the Republican Party and to the nation and to sick people that could have had great health care was not good. So I'm not a fan of John McCain, and that's fine.
Do you feel a responsibility as president to bring the nation together? I
do, and I think I am in a certain way bringing it together. I can tell you that a big portion of this nation is united like it's never been united before. You look at our economy, you look at jobs, you look at African American, the lowest in the history of our country. Unemployment numbers, the best numbers they've ever had.
But that's what I'm saying.
Hispanic, you look at Asian, you look at women, the best in 65 years, best numbers in 65 years. I think I am bringing it together. I think I'm bringing it together.
Not by talking about John McCain.
I just said, you brought up a question, Maria. I didn't bring it up. I didn't mention John McCain until you asked me a question about John McCain. Now, I could say I have no comment, but that's not me. But you shouldn't have brought it up. Actually, I thought you weren't supposed to bring it up, but that's okay. You know, fake news every once in a while.
It's not fake news. You just told me why you have an issue with him. It's real news.
A very serious issue. He handed something to the FBI on me. He knew it was a fake. He handed it to the FBI. That's an issue.
And now we're going to get
repeal and replace of Obamacare. He campaigned for years. That's an issue. But I didn't bring it up, Maria. You did.
Wow. I really feel like there's some type of falling out there. Anyways, like I say, I have not been sleeping well, and I think I know part of the reason. I don't know if you're there or on what device that we could be reaching you, but Senator John McCain's ghost, are you with us?
How are you, my friend? The pipes keeping you up at night?
They are. They are. Thank you for joining us. I don't know where he sounds like. Is there any way you can turn him down? I don't know if there's a...
Senator, can you just,
give a countdown from 10?
We're going through a different, spiritual realm right now. Are you there?
I'm right here.
Okay, that sounds...
Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Is this a problem?
All right. Well, Senator John McCain's ghost. I have to ask you, why are you hunting Donald Trump in this way?
Well, my friend, as you know, John McCain always tells it like it is, which is the opposite of Donald Trump. And it's a complete lie. I haven't been haunting him at all. I've been haunting Joy Behar, who has been a total bitch to my daughter on The View. So that's who I've been haunting, my friend. And the idea that Donald Trump, where was he in Vietnam? I've been haunting Joy, and one night I made Whoopi think that her dreads that there was a bird in her dreads. But besides that, it's all been Joy.
A bird in her dreads. Okay. But so you're telling me you haven't been, because it really appears like, you died months ago, a year ago, I don't know. And Donald Trump seems to be constantly talking about him. You're telling me that you have not been haunting him.
I have not been haunting Donald Trump. It's been a very disorienting time for me. And I'll tell you, the most disorienting part of even realizing of what it's been like to be dead is a completely different life-altering experience. Donald Trump has nothing to do with it.
Well, what has been disorienting about being dead?
Well, for one, getting used to not having a physical form, and secondly, not getting invited on Meet the Press on a weekly basis.
Right. That's got to be very. That's going to be tricky.
But let's be clear about something, my friend. Whatever it is, in my spiritual form, not getting invited on Meet the Press, you know what it is?
What?
It's good for John McCain.
It's good for John McCain. I remember
it's
that.
Good for John McCain.
There was a lot of that back in the day. But all right, so you're.
Have you ever disrespected my daughter, you Jew?
Yeah, I have. I'm sorry.
Well, get used to the pipe noises and coming in and complaining about your back and whatever goddamn else. The one thing I like about being dead is I can call you a Jew like that.
And no repercussions.
No repercussions.
And so tell me, what you haven't been? You claim you haven't been haunting Donald Trump, but yet we've had at least almost a half a dozen Republicans who have come out and said it's inappropriate for Trump to be criticizing you in your death.
Lindsey Graham used to ask me for pictures back when I was in the Air Force just so we could look at them.
I didn't know that.
You were
Where's the
quite
loyalty?
A snack.
What's that?
I'm sorry, John McCain, you were quite a snack, so I don't think you can really blame him.
That was never in question. Or was that in question?
That anybody
never
was in question. Just asking you. So now, so you claim not to be haunting Donald Trump, but yet, why is your name still? Why are we even talking? Why are we talking to you?
First of all, were you on Sex in the City or something? Did you ever do anything notable with your life that I would know you for?
Well, I was actually on Sex in the City. I did do a guest spot there, yeah.
I'm guessing
Really?
It was with the lawyer broad and not one of the hot ones.
It was with the lawyer broad, yes, not one of the hot ones.
Did you even get to sleep with her, or is it sort of like a best friend but straight guy sort of thing originally written for a gay guy but given to you instead as like a Jew thing?
Yeah, no, that's almost a totally accurate depiction of the role I played. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being straight with me, so I'm going to give it to you straight.
Oh.
I haven't been haunting Donald Trump, but have you ever seen the film The Sixth Sense?
I did, yes, actually.
You know how Bruce Willis didn't know he was dead?
Right.
So for several months after I died, I'm in the well of the Senate saying that we need to give Moldova suitcase nukes to confront Putin, and Lindsay isn't even there to give me a back massage.
I see. And so how did you come to realize that you were actually dead?
I realized it on the fourth time that Chuck Todd did not return one of my texts when I said, "Hey, you fucking cue ball loser, where's my spot on MSNBC?"
And
there was no response.
And then what would you have?
And my daughter stopped asking me for money.
Is that right? And that's how you knew that you were dead at that point.
And I said, my friends, if we don't simultaneously bomb Libya, Ukraine, give suitcase nukes to Moldova, arm an insurgency in Venezuela, and unilaterally recognize a joint state between Saudi Arabia and Israel, Putin has won. And there wasn't one media booking.
That's got to be. Did you have that moment? I mean, I remember that movie where like Bruce Willis was completely freaked out and he kept running around the house and looking and replaying stuff in his head. Like, what? Did you have one of those things?
I called Jeff Flake. I said, "Hey, what's up, gay Flake?" Nothing. I told Cindy that her new nail job make her look like a working woman, and I didn't put it that way. Nothing registered.
Nothing registered. Just ignored. Just like
totally ignored.
Yeah. No, that.
As you can imagine, having a complete narcissistic personality disorder is very difficult when you're a ghost.
I can imagine that's difficult. Have you reached out to anybody else? I mean, it's sort of weird that you and I would connect because I was never quite the fan.
Well, I mean, I was obviously never a fan of you. I found politics aside, Janine Garofalo to be a much more appealing radio personality.
All right, fair enough.
But I've always enjoyed the company of Jews who bitch and whine about their health, and since Joe, like Lindsay, has completely portrayed me not only to Trump, but the goddamn Chinese, and I can't seem to get an NBC booker to get booked as a ghost, but that's what we're working on, my friend.
So
I would like to come in my spiritual form and explain why, of course, we can assassinate Maduro actually very easily.
So you've come to me because Joe Lieberman wasn't available. Is that what you're saying?
Is that the most insulting thing you've ever heard in your life?
Well, it's pretty close. I mean, my kid's a little bit worse. But
you look like, I bet your facial expression, which I can see right now spiritually, looks like my wife when I tell her what her hair job makes her look like.
All right. Well, listen, John McCain's ghost, thank you so much for taking the time today. Maybe we will talk to you again in the future.
I will see you tonight, my friend.
But
I hope you enjoy your Casper mattress because no rest.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's great. That was a great Casper plug.
John McCain's ghost doesn't mince words.
He's super cranky still.
He's already canceled, so he can say whatever he wants.
Yeah, literally canceled.
When were you on Sex in the City?
That back in when the Sex in the City was on.
What were you doing on it?
I played Letterman Lou, the guy who chewed his steak and spit it out.
Huh? I've never seen that episode.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I haven't seen like all of them. So.
Oh, all right. I'm always suspect of people who have.
People thought that I was joking when I said that you were playing against type, but when have any of us ever known Sam to not finish his steak?
Never.
Wait, so why did you chew the steak and then you spit it out?
Yes, I had an eating disorder.
Oh.
I was a writer from New York who had moved to L.A., and I had a eating disorder. That's how I lost weight and sold a sitcom.
Did they play it for laughs, or was this more like a serious?
It was one of the few serious Sex and the City's episodes where it was like tonight on Sex and the City.
Very special.
A very special edition.
There is
when
such
Miranda realizes her friend has an eating disorder.
There is such a stark gender breakdown between who knows about this scene and who doesn't.
I was going to say, if you're a guy and you've watched, first of all, if you're a guy and you've watched all the Sex and the City episodes, it's shocking. I don't know what else to say.
Like, it doesn't matter how impressive the person is. Like, we had on Doug Henwood and Liza Featherstone on the Antifada a little while back, and we were talking about Cynthia Nixon at the time, and if the Sex and the City came up, and Doug had no idea what we were talking about, and Liza just goes, "You don't know about Miranda?"
I had definitely not seen that scene until I started working here.
It's a gendered. It was
and
a gendered
I was disturbed.
show.
I was like, Jesus Christ, what have I gotten myself into?
This episode of the Majority Report is supported by Pitchfork Economics with Nick Hanauer, a weekly podcast that explores why rising income inequality will lead to pitchforks and what we can do about it. Every week, Hanauer is joined by some of the world's most original economic thinkers in a convention-busting exploration of who gets what and why in the American economy. If you want to learn how to make the economy work for all Americans, subscribe to Pitchfork Economics at pitchforkeconomics.com or wherever you get your podcasts. It is time for us now to head into the fun half of the program wherein we will have fun. And you can join us there by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Just pennies a day. You can support the free show, and you can get the fun half every day.
Wait, people are coming?
People are going to join us.
Okay.
We're all going.
Oh, okay.
There's going to be a lot of people here in the fun half. We're going to temporally and spatially move into that that next dimension. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. With the coupon code MAJORITY, you get 10% off and can enjoy those products in either dimension, whether it's the fun or the, not so fun free half. All right. Today is Friday. Tuesday was Tuesday. What happened on Tuesday, Michael?
A lot of things happened on Tuesday, and you can find the full episode of the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel, as well as, of course, on Patreon. And thank you. We crossed another nice threshold on our Patreon. Over 2,100 now, so thanks everybody. And today, released for everybody, an illicit history, War Against All Puerto Ricans, continued with Nelson Dennis, incredibly important writer, really important conversation. Patreon.com/TMBS to get the whole thing.
I got drunk on Tuesday by accident.
By accident?
By accident.
How did you get drunk by accident?
I was at this bar, and this guy, I had something to do in the city, and I had like a lot of time to kill, so I was just hanging out at a bar, and this guy kept yelling at me and saying I looked like a musician, and demanding to know.
You do.
That's so cool.
What? I don't know. He was like a weird long hair guy that I met at the West Village. His fingernails were painted black. He was like an older man. And then he kept buying me drinks, and I'm like, all right, whatever. And he started telling me about how he's being evicted from his co-op because of the co-op board. The co-op board organized against him for total bullshit reasons. And that just goes to show you that, it's not just capitalism. There's also a tyranny of the majority.
Was it Iggy Pop?
He had an Iggy Pop vibe.
I was going to say, like, that sounds like an Iggy Pop story, maybe.
Oh, no, I remember what he said. He took a photo of me with him, and then he was a musician of some kind himself, and he posted it to his Facebook wall and said he had met Sean Lennon at a West Village bar.
Wow.
And then I gave him my phone number for some reason, but he never texted me or anything.
But wait, I don't understand. How did you get drunk in this process?
Well, he kept giving me drinks.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. All right. Well, anything else that you want to talk about to promote? The Chapo Trap House Guide, the Chapo Guide to Revolution, still available? Best-selling book?
It is still available. I did bring a copy, but I'm not holding it right now.
That is weird.
It's a little weird, isn't it? I feel a little naked without it.
I was going to say.
Yeah, you can actually still pick up a copy of the Chapo Guide to Revolution, a manifesto against logic, facts, and reason, blurred by Breonna Gray, who's now Bernie Sanders' national press director.
Nice.
Yeah, that is available in bookstores from coast to coast. Paperback edition is coming out later this year, but it's the same.
Same. You're not even updating it at all.
No, I wanted to write a new introduction, but I think it's just like an added expense for the publisher, and they're just really,
That's
flinty.
not the way they work.
Oh, I should have said.
And people can go, can check out Chapo Trap House via Patreon. Is that right?
Via Patreon, yes. go to, I don't know, chapotraphouse.com. I never have to look up my own show.
Right. I think if you Google it, you could probably find it.
I do have another thing to promote, though. So
Please.
the New York Department of Sanitation has a campaign to name the members of the recycling team. And the team, there are these anthropomorphic bins that teach you, what to recycle and what to compost and all that sort of stuff.
I did not know that, but that's
you
good
never,
to know.
you never seen
because they don't have names.
They don't have names, right? So it's hard to refer to them. You're just like, the blue one or the green one. That's clearly a woman. That kind of thing. That presents as a woman. And so it's a campaign to name them, and people can vote on it, right?
Right.
And first they're voting on the gray one, who is ostensibly the leader of the group, the traditional gray trash can. And the thing is, they have like a form with just 3 names, 3 ballot options, and they're all dog shit. One was like Captain Hero, like terrible.
Captain Hero.
Yeah, but nothing has nothing to do with the backstory.
What's wrong with Captain Hero?
It's just
I want
generic.
some pushback on that. I like that.
It's generic. It's we should.
Bro.
I mean, this is for New York City, the greatest city on earth. We should expect more.
Right.
They represent all of us, and so I would like them to name, if not the gray trash can, the blue recycle bin, or maybe the compost bin after me.
After you.
Yep. So you can go to look up the New York City Department of Sanitation on Twitter and tell them, name the can after Virgil. There's also a form. If you scroll down a bit, you can find they tweeted about it. I don't know if voting is still on, but you can go pick up a ballot there, an online ballot, and disregard the 3 options they have. That's dog shit. There's a line to give your email address. So just write in, name the can after Virgil @gmail.com.
And is that actually an email address?
Somebody actually made an email address when I said that on the show.
Yeah.
And has said they've gotten 11 responses so far. Though I forget what the exact wording was. It was like, name the can after Virgil, I think, or name the can Virgil @gmail. Either way, we're just trying to send a message
poorly constructed campaign.
Oh, absolutely.
But I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
At that campaign.
I wish
Captain
I was,
Hero
like, coming in to
is
promote,
ridiculous.
Like, some type of cyclone relief in Mozambique right now, just the contrast.
Well, I mean, everybody's got their bailiwick. I mean,
I actually made this promotion on our episode at the end of our episode where we spent an hour talking about the Christchurch shooting.
Oh,
Jamie. Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Well, I don't get to decide when the voting is happening. They should. I mean, they didn't say, "Oh, we're suspending the voting because of this tragedy."
Well, I think our producer at Antifada, AP Andy, would be very interested in this campaign because, like many post-anarchists before him, he loves trash. He's really into trash.
So you a dumpster diver?
He's a bit of a frigid.
Is he a dumpster diver?
Speaking of the Antifada.
Oh, yes. I have a show called The Antifada. If you guys haven't listened to it, you should check it out. This week, we had on Ellie Valley, who I believe did some illustrations for the Chapo book.
He
correct?
did do illustrations for it.
Yeah, and we talk about his recent skirmishes with Chelsea Clinton and Meghan McCain. We also broaden it out to a wider discussion of Jewish identity, Zionism, and the Jewish diaspora. And also, I wanted to plug, I was recently on an episode of Struggle Session with the great Leslie Lee III, trying to kind of bridge the gap between goths and leftists. So, clearly that person is me. And we talked about Interview with a Vampire. And wow, I learned a lot about vampires. I got to say, I'm a little embarrassed to be a Gothic American of this age and know so little about the culture of my own people.
And Matt's not here, but people should check out Literary Hangover on the YouTube channel. There's something literary going on with the hangover. All right, folks, we're going to take a...
So, Sam, I just had a question. Thinking about voting and write-in votes, have they released the full? I don't know if you looked at it. Have they released the full write-in? The write-ins for the recent public advocate election in New York.
Not to my knowledge. Why? Were you look?
Because I'm curious if either of us were written in.
That's right. I forgot that you edged me out in the race for governor by one vote, right?
And I played. Hey, when I voted in the public advocate race, as you can see by this pin, I played it fair. I did not write myself in. Even though I was tempted to.
Well, good for you. That's I have not seen those yet. We will see. But maybe we can talk about over the break how you're doing in the polling for the Libertarian presidential candidate, where I think you'll find that to the extent that it's actually legit, I am winning. All right, we'll take a quick break, head into the fun half. 646-257-3920.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them.
Almost has what?
Almost
says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
I know, they're the lower right quadrant, and they think like, oh, that's the good
We are back. Sam Seder on the majority parts. The fun half, ladies and gentlemen. I forgot even to call in to the call-in system. I will do that now. We've had a sort of a victory here, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, some days ago, we were commenting on the announcement of Jexodus. And
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Please use no speakerphone and have your one comment or question ready. Listen for Sam to call out your area code. Sam will be with you shortly.
Up around here.
Robot voice dropping some knowledge.
All right. So as we said, about a week or two ago, I think it was, maybe less, because time is dilated. We called out the founder, I think her name was Elizabeth Pipko, of Jexodus, and said, hey, that's ridiculous because why do you have to call it a Jewish Exodus? The first one was Exodus, was Jewish. The first Exodus was Jewish. Why does yours have to be Jexodus? and it was equivalent to calling it like Jizrael or Jassover, you know, that Jewish Passover, or Yom Kippur, a Jewish Yom Kippur, that type of thing.
Janushavitz.
It's like, exactly. It's
Josh
a little bit.
Hashanah.
Josh Hashanah. It would all been a little bit redundant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, after pushing and behind the scenes machinations, we have some good news. Reported in Haaretz today, Jexodus, we hardly knew ya. Right-wing Jewish movement changes name to Exodus, just to Exodus. They have dropped the J.
You're welcome.
Now, here's what I'm confused about. How do we know this is about Jews?
Well, I think obviously without the J sort of to clearly state what we're doing here, now I'm confused about this project. This could mean young people leaving the Republican Party. It could mean people who in general are concerned about a more aggressive foreign policy. I mean, I'm at a loss.
Unrooted cosmopolitans leaving
this could be a Bob Marley reference. That's a great Bob Marley album.
How is this different from Walk Away? Why? Where is the people who are going to stand up for Brandon Strachan? Brandon Strachan. Who was the first person to patent and trademark Walk Away. This Exodus is just, what does Exodus mean? It means walk away.
They should bring back the Candace Owens formula and call it Jexit, the Jewish Brexit.
That's what it should be, Jexit. And then of course they'd be stepping on Brexit. But what is Brexit? It's just basically some type of preemptive knockoff of Walk Away. I would like to say, send a message out to Brandon Strachan that he should be suing all of these people for copyright infringement, patent infringement, trademark infringement, personal space violation, microaggression infringement, all of it. All of it.
The new case law on microaggression infringement.
All of whatever infringing.
I think that whatever you think of London, and we've had our differences, clearly, particularly on the use of the word apathetic, specifically the proper usage of the word apathetic. The just sort of incredible disrespect of him and the broader conservative movement is kind of stunning.
It's really a shame.
Well, maybe if he sues the Brexit, that will keep it from happening.
Then they get the name back, and then they get all of it. All of the Jexit would have been great, I think. But
I think they should just all go under his leadership. They should incorporate under Brandon Strachan's business model.
Should be
Strachan
oriented.
Right, unity.
So where is the motivation, of course, for things like Jexit and Jexodus and Exodus and Jockaway, the Jewish walk-away movement from the Democratic Party? Well, it is coming from the lover of Jews, the great white Jope. That would be Donald Trump. Here he is. Responding to the fact that now we up to 4, I think it is, candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris. Are there others who have decided to boycott the
Buttigieg?
Oh, and Buttigieg, who are
what is it?
Boycotting.
Is it actually? I actually do need to know, I guess, apparently how to pronounce this guy's last name.
Well, eventually. And boycotting the right-wing group called AIPAC, which is a supportive of the Likud government in Israel. It's a right-wing organization. We know this is the case. People have known this for years. Here is Donald Trump providing analysis as to the Democrats who are not attending the AIPAC conference.
You said Democrats are anti-Israel and that they're anti-Jewish. You're all shipping the AIPAC conference next week, but you're not going as well.
The Democrats have very much proven to be anti-Israel. There's no question about that, and it's a disgrace. I mean, I don't know what's happened to them, but they are totally anti-Israel. Frankly, I think they're anti-Jewish.
There it is. Defender.
He does have a lot of Jewish mannerisms, but he is not Jewish.
Donald Trump. Right. There he is. Donald Trump proclaiming that the Jews should just jock away.
You mean
And-
I just wonder. I don't know if I have no proof, but I would be very curious to know what Donald Trump's dad was thinking of the Holocaust while Bernie Sanders' family was a victim of it.
That would be
Very curious.
Fred Trump.
Fred
Now,
Trump.
Maybe
where
we'll hear that question asked in the debates.
where could Donald Trump possibly have gotten the idea that by not going to the AIPAC conference, which is a conference that is specifically dedicated to supporting the right wing in Israel, where could Donald Trump possibly have calculated the idea that this makes someone like Bernie Sanders, who has spoken of the fact that his family fled the Holocaust, where could they have possibly gotten the idea that this makes you anti-Semitic? I'm trying to think. Oh, look what happened this morning on Fox and Friends.
AIPAC also is not an extreme right-wing pro-Israel group. This is the group that plays it down the middle as best they can, trying to create a bipartisan consensus of Republicans and Democrats. If you won't go to AIPAC, you are at some level anti-Israel or maybe anti-Semitic. We've seen the comments. I'm not saying they are, but you're willing to you're not willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with our strongest ally. All of them boycotting it shows you how afraid they are of the fringe left base that.
Well, and the part of that fringe left base includes the majority of Jews in this country, incidentally, we should just say. So that fringe left base that does not support AIPAC or the right wing in Israel. So Pete Hegseth, your rabbi, is calling on line 1.
Playing
so-
identity politics, Pete.
It's so absurd. Like, I recently watched a documentary about who supports AIPAC, and most of the money, because there aren't that many Jews in the U.S., most of the money comes from right-wing Christians, evangelical Christians, who literally, they support Israel because they literally believe that it's going to play an important role in the end times. All the Jews are going to go back to Israel. There's going to be a battle. There's going to be a rapture, and some of the Jews will convert and go to heaven, and most of the Jews will die and go to hell. So to say that it's anti-Semitic,
2/3 and 1/3, I think,
not to ally with those people is just like ridiculous. on its
Oi,
face.
we all got here and now we're burning.
I've already laid down the marker that I would rather be on the right-hand side of God because of my eczema. I'm looking for a special dispensation not to go to hell.
Can we just try it? Can we just try and finally put this to rest? To build the third temple and get the cow and just see what happens, like in Contact.
You know, it seems to me you could probably pull that off for maybe under $10 million.
Yeah.
And it would resolve a lot of questions.
Yeah, just do it, and then nothing happens. Well, I think nothing happens. And then it's like, okay, we can just stop, doing all this shit.
I still, if you're going to go ahead with that, please let me know, because I really do feel strongly about the eternal hellfire, because my eczema comes out with heat.
Well,
so like the first sun I get of the summer, I'm going to get eczema. I got it right now, actually, on my chest.
Well, the
Jegzema.
Jegzema.
Well, the Jews have to agree to it, and the Muslims also have to agree to it too. But I think you could make just a rational argument that let's all, as humanity, just try it.
Try it, see if we like it.
Yeah, let's try to trigger all the end times for all the religions. I mean, I'll try anything once.
We've actually done, they have done that to some extent in India. That was a huge thing in the 90s when they demolished that mosque to rebuild what they claimed was like an ancient Hindu temple. That, it didn't end the world, but it did facilitate the rise of BJP.
Or maybe it started the end of the world.
Well, I actually am receptive to that idea, because we actually could be in end times,
we
right?
don't know.
The world is ending in slow motion right now.
I don't think we should be too snobby about Armageddon arguments when it's like actually happening. There's just different causation explanations.
Yeah, they just got to wait a
that
little
are
longer.
more or less credible.
On the Israel thing, when we were at CPAC waiting for Diamond and Silk, for an hour before was Israel. I walked in midway through and I was like, who the hell is this crank? And they told me it's Israel's ambassador to the United States. Who is
it now?
I have no idea what the guy's name is, but it's Israel's ambassador to us.
No, I know. Back in the day, Janine and we critiqued Israel in 2004. The next day, we heard from the Israeli embassy, and we ended up booking a couple of debates.
It's a different dynamic now.
Yeah.
Was it Dor Gold?
I don't know his name.
Okay.
So might be. And so this is one of the worst speeches I've ever seen. And he has slides, and he is trying to prove some inscrutable point that the Jews have always been in Jerusalem or something like that. And he's arguing against some people at the University of Michigan that nobody cares about or has ever heard of. And he's showing these slides of coins and talking about...
Juan Cole is a very respected scholar, my friend.
He is showing...
Everything else stands except that.
He is showing, he's showing these slides of coins and saying, oh, look, there's a menorah on this coin, and that's prima facie evidence. Now let's, fast forward to 73 BC. And it's like, nobody's buying this. It's just dead air in the entire auditorium. And this is, the CPAC. This is the right-wing audience. And I've no idea what he's trying to accomplish here or what point he's trying to prove, because everyone here is already on your side, unless they're, one of the young future Republican groypers who think that, you need to be wiped off the map. Then, he shovels off stage, and then Diamond and Silk come on. And they just, they do their whole shtick, and they just do this bit and they just say, and we will always stand with Israel, and just like thunderous applause. And
was that not on the coin? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's all you have to say.
Effective.
You don't have to teach a freaking college class
Well,
to get these people on your side.
One side's trying to live, the other side's sending rockets.
He's coming in and thinks that he's got to present a factual, and people are literally like, facts, boo. Let's just rock this. We don't need facts.
Yeah, no, Israel rocks, guys. Come on. That's it. That's all you got to say.
Well, that's the disjuncture. Like, yeah.
This is CPAC.
That's the same
I mean,
way,
you may need to do that to
between
provide
lying
cover at
about
some, like at the Heritage
WMDs.
Foundation, but at CPAC, you just need to come out and just cheer for that thing.
Every time a crazy Zionist tells me that I need to get back to Israel, I'm like, hey, I live in a place called New York. Ever heard of it?
That's actually
Great.
a fucking
good point.
I'm totally getting myself in trouble here, but one of the funniest lines I've ever read from a Hamas spokesperson. This is several years ago when they were trying to make their first sort of
back when they were funny.
No, they're still pretty funny, but this is when they were trying to their first cultivation of like, hey, let's do some hits in the Western press. And this guy was like, actually, making a broader legitimate point but it was basically saying like our issue is not with Jewish people, our issue is with being dislodged from our land. And he goes, as an example, if the Jew wants to live in Brooklyn, that's no problem.
I guess it's in the delivery.
There
makes it funny.
Oh no, it was funny. It was objectively funny.
There is no chance that, and I haven't been to either city, that Tel Aviv is even a tenth as fun as Berlin.
Hands down, Berlin is very fun.
Jerusalem more fun than both.
Jerusalem boring.
Jerusalem's
all right, let's go to the phones.
Little Israel humor.
I think somebody snuck in first spot today, calling from a 509 area code. This is, of course, a back channel call.
Hey, Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Oh, my God. The conspiracy theories are true. Look at you, jumping right in.
Yeah, I got out of court early, and I thought I'd call, so that's how that worked out. You did an interview the other day with this guy who wrote a book called Lost Connections. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes, Johan Hari. Yes, I do.
Yeah, so I went ahead and pre-ordered that book. Very good interview.
It's been out for a while.
Mentioned something that... Really?
Yeah.
The new one?
No, well, I'm in the paperback. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe because I selected paperback.
Ah, okay. There you go.
Damn it. Okay, well, anyways. So anyhow, he mentioned that more 18-month-old children in the United States recognize the McDonald's logo than know their own last name.
That's correct.
It's really interesting.
Yep.
And it made me think about how I grew up in a town called Albany, Oregon. It's a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And downtown Albany, Oregon, there was this old Mennonite man named William McDonald, who had a shoe shop, a shoe repair shop, right?
Yep.
And he had a big sign outside, had a big M on it, and said, McDonald shoe repair.
Right.
And as a kid, I never thought for a minute that maybe they sold hamburgers there. It was just clear that it was a different thing, right?
Right.
So I got all these fucking David Pakman's sock puppet account coming at me on Twitter about how there's other people who have used panels or squares, right? There's a famous Dutch artist who sort of did these colorful, bright squares.
Right.
I forget his name.
Mondrian is also known for that, but I don't think he was Dutch. But go ahead.
They're missing the entire point. And by they, I mean David Pakman pretending to be like 10 other people. You guys are, again, I'm repeating myself, but you guys are direct competitors
right.
who share a platform.
Correct.
It's not like his studio is inspired by yours. It's an exact replica. So, again, they fail over and over again. And I'm waiting to hear back from you. I told you, I guess, on Wednesday, I'm willing to do this case pro bono.
Well, I'm contemplating it. I mean, I could sue David Pakman, of course, for infringement. Here's another clip of his. Here's a clip of his studio that is clearly. Well, that's an old. These are old stuff, dude. You got to get a new Pakman video.
This is before he stole your intellectual property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that.
Well,
oh, geez.
That's pure theft.
I mean, that's nuts.
Do you want to, Reagan, do you feel comfortable telling a family that might be deported that you're dropping their case to take this on? Is that how strongly you feel about it?
So I'm picking up the sound from the David video that you're playing.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So I can't hear you. Okay.
Michael asked, do you feel comfortable telling a family who is maybe have family members who are facing deportation, your primary work is as an immigration lawyer, that you can't handle their case because you're handling my lawsuit against David Pakman?
Well, actually, this hearing this morning, it's a lady, she's been here since 1993. Her 22-year-old son has severe Down syndrome. And I told the judge, I got to get the fuck out of here. I got a call to make because the bottom line is I got this cease and desist letter locked and loaded. I went ahead and started working on it. And so you just say the word.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad you brought this up, Ronald Reagan, because there is another measure of this controversy. As you know, the controversy between David and I has grown, and I'm going to let you go because you're hanging up there. You're getting loud. But this controversy has grown. It was covered by this guy at Progressive Voices who apparently is fake news, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to what he has to say at the end of his report on this thing. It's a disgusting lie. It's a smear. Here it is. Pop it open.
We absolutely know that he copied it essentially. But did you guys notice that it was similar? I really didn't notice that. I didn't know that until today. But look, I'm actually going to throw a curveball at you. So Sam is basically accusing, it's an accusation, but I guess it's proven true. I mean, David admits that he basically copied Sam Seder. But apparently, if you go back to a 2012 videos of Sam Seder, he just has like a normal like wall backdrop type of thing with like Majority Report behind him. So who was actually the person who kind of, I guess, started that whole panel thing? I guess it's Kyle Kalinske, dude. The dude with the massage parlor. The hand job studio is what it was, because it looks like it's like a massage parlor, and you go like behind the panel, and there's
Progressive Voices apparently
someone giving like
Countdown.
happy endings and shit. But listen, man, that was really funny, and obviously,
pause it. All right, look. This guy's got it wrong. It's a smear job. It wasn't the idea that Kyle Kalinske is what was the inspiration for those titles. This is the problem when you get these younger type folks who come around and start talking about YouTube sets because they have a limited memory, very, very myopic. I present to you a picture of Farron Cousins in the Go Left, which ultimately became Ring of Fire Radio studios down in Florida. You will notice the handcrafted panel behind him with the gels and the light. Now, that was handmade, but that's where I stole the idea from, not from Kyle Kalinske or any type of whatever he's got going on in his up in New York. So set the record straight. And cease and desist. That's all I want to say. The cease and desist.
Everybody.
Gist and desist.
Yeah, take note for
for Jews. Gist and desist, right.
Let's go to the phones. Another 509. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's CISPA. How are you?
CISPA. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Spokane.
Spokane. What's on your mind?
Did you happen to see your email I sent you last night?
No, I did not. I mean, I get
okay.
literally hundreds of emails, and it takes me like weeks to
Yeah,
respond to them.
that's fair. Well, there's another streamer I'm a pretty big fan of. His name is Destiny. Are you familiar with him?
Am I familiar with Destiny?
Yeah.
You know, I think it sounds familiar. I feel like I looked Destiny up
I've
at
heard
one
the
point,
name.
but I'm not terribly familiar with it.
Okay, so he's a pretty big Twitch streamer.
Right.
He does a lot of debating against scummy right-wing people and does podcasts and whatnot. He's very, very good.
Oh, good.
Basically a fan of you and a fan of Destiny. So last night he was talking to someone else. They're developing a podcast, a political debate podcast.
Oh, good.
And they're getting some pretty big right-wing named people. And the main guy was telling him, hey, you need to form a team. And he said, I don't really have anyone I want. And he paused and he said, actually, there's two people that I could think of that I want to contact and I'd like to get on, Michael Brooks and Sam Seder.
Great.
Cool.
So
Let's do it.
this could be a pretty good opportunity. So I'd like to get you two in contact.
Well, I mean,
pretty major.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not hard to find. I mean, hopefully I'm hard to find
Yeah,
in
yeah.
person, but not.
Don't make jokes with that.
Well, yeah, I wanted to call and see if you guys were interested, and
Well,
to a little
okay.
parlay to get you two together.
All right, great. Well, I'll look at the email and
calls are
appreciate it.
are
Thank
like
you.
social intros.
Right.
You're just like, so I'd like you to be.
Thank you.
friends
I
with
appreciate
my-"
that.
We should do that.
Hi,
Thank you for
Sam.
the
Just
call.
calling, let you know you got a package in the lobby.
Again, that would be a little bit more
That would be
disturbing
riveting.
than the call.
Calling from a 248 area code. I'm saying the
Yes.
you know the
No, I understand.
guy downstairs. 248.
Hello. Hey, hi. First time caller. I've been watching you guys since I awoke back just before Trump got in.
Okay.
I wanted to let you guys know one.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Get him.
Well, what's your name? Where are you
I
calling
wanted to
from?
let you know
What-
one.
I'm sorry. What's your name?
Oh, yeah, sure. My name is Karen, and I'm calling from Michigan.
All right, Karen from Michigan.
The state that they purged the votes.
Right.
Yet, so Bernie didn't win. So anyway, I'm calling first to let you know that I'm totally, I really love listening to you guys, Michael and you and Jamie and, I'm sorry, I don't remember the other guy's name.
That's all right.
Too many people.
That's not important.
But anyway,
Matt Dinn.
I appreciate your comments and listening to you because you help me hone in on what it is that I'm trying to express when I say that I'm dissatisfied with the health system and, I've just had a feeling for a long time that all that crap they taught me in high school is, well, crap.
Right.
So, I just feel, if that's okay, that you guys have really helped me a lot, and I can express myself way better in writing than I used to be able to.
Well, I appreciate the call. That's
an honor.
that's nice, and I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much for listening.
But there's one more thing.
Oh,
there's
good.
one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was watching David Pakman before I was watching you guys.
Oh, right. Before he stole my
And
set.
sure, he stole your set, but have
Right.
you considered that imitation is one of the highest compliments that you can get?
Yes, I have.
And
Believe
also,
me.
also, I think you guys need to stop picking on each other.
Well,
and join rank.
I'm
because
gonna
we're
let you in
talking
on.
about
I'm gonna let you in.
Bernie.
I'm gonna let you in on a secret
Okay.
about Pac-Man and I. He is a
Yeah.
horrible person for what he's done.
Yeah. The problem is, Karen, is it's not a joke. There's real fundamental moral differences here.
The amount of time that I spent in taping each one of these gels, and you don't even see like a fraction of how many gels are in this studio. We only, it's a small point, but if I was to get up, walk across the room in a 360 fashion, you would see gels all around the studio. And that took me days and hours. And I experimented.
Did you use like Brill cream?
A little
Brill
bit.
cream, you know.
But
anyway,
yeah.
sure. And the other thing, one more, is that your set design is way more abstract than David's. His is more regular and organized.
I appreciate that.
I don't know. Maybe it's not all that much of a copy.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I will take your advice under advisement, as it were. But I appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Have
for
a
listening.
wonderful day, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
Danke.
Yeah. Oh,
thank
you.
you.
Oh, there you go. Or Jaron, as we call it. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir? What is the latest, John?
Kick his ass.
Yeah, I want to talk a little convention numbers here. Yeah, I agree that what you're all talking about earlier, it's hard to say, how the convention's going to turn out, projecting into the future. But I want to talk about some basic numbers. There's 2,437 district delegates and 841 at-large delegates. And so there's also 490 party leaders and elected officials, which at that point represents 7.8% of the total votes. Now, the number that you're
Now, John, let me just stop you just so that people know. That figure, the 400 some odd you just said, is the new number for superdelegates. It used to be, I think, almost double that, correct?
No, it's actually different. This is different. These are actually pledged officials.
Oh, okay.
They're included in the actual totals, which I didn't even know until I did research into this. And so, which is pretty bad because, that's not necessarily going to help Bernie because, people are talking about superdelegates, but, the elected officials most likely aren't going to vote for him either. And like I said, they represent 7.8% of the figures. And so to get 50.1%, you would have to get 1,885 delegates from those three figures. And I agree with what y'all are saying. It's going to be very hard for anybody, but also it's hard to predict, the best thing is to see that Bernie's actually ahead in the prediction markets, in Iowa and New Hampshire. And no one from the Democratic Party, since before '68, if they've won both of those, they've always won the nomination. So that's one good sign.
John, do you know how many superdelegates there are in 2020? I can't find that figure. Is it the same amount, or is it just that that they just don't count until the second? Because my understanding is that there was actually maybe a third had been lopped off. I'm not sure about that.
No, it's 3768 is the number. Before the initial vote, the first ballot is going to be 3768, and then they're going to add another. Let's see, what is it? 764 of the super delegates, and so yeah. This is going to be it's going to be another 18%. So the good news is that essentially 82% of the vote will be determined, by the delegates before the super delegates. So it's really not as bad as a lot of people are making it sound. Bernie's still going to have a pretty significant lead, but they are going to be 82% of the total ballots.
Yeah,
and so that's not that bad.
I've always contended that I find it very hard to believe that the superdelegates would vote en masse for against the candidate who was clearly in the lead going into the convention. I just think that like that, you want to talk about a completely predictable implosion of your political party. That's the recipe for it. And theoretically, most of these super delegates could make that calculation. If it's close and it's like they're 1 or 2 percentage points apart from each other, then I think it becomes a legitimate, this is the apparatus that we have to decide these things. And, it's hard to argue with that.
Right. It's just, if you look at 2008, just the differences between Obama and Clinton weren't that big, to where, the differences now between Bernie, and especially if it's, between anybody, but especially if it's an O'Rourke in Biden, they're going to be especially large. And
You're talking, wait a second, you're talking about numbers difference, or you're talking about like ideologically speaking?
No, I'm talking about ideologically.
Right.
The super delegates were more in tune to change their original votes because, like I said, there wasn't that much of a difference.
Right.
Where, if they come into play this time, there's going to be, a movement to stop Bernie. There's no doubt about it. And so I don't know how, historically, that's going to actually have an impact on this year's convention. So
keep in mind these.
Hold on, Virgil is something.
Keep in mind that these PLEOs, they're not a monolith. They are self-interested. That includes, to my knowledge, every single sitting Democratic member of Congress. And I think there's a real question of whether there is such a strong, left structure engaging in primaries and engaging in a real project to move the party to the left and punish those who are ideologically out of step with where they need to be with their seats, that would be able to apply realistic, pressure to say, well, get on board with this.
That's building, right?
That's what happened to the Republican Party.
Right.
There's not a single Republican senator who would vote to remove Trump from office for that very reason.
Yes. The idea that you have, particularly like an organization like Justice Democrats and AOC is coming in that, and you see there's, I saw some report out of Data Progress the other day. They're talking about going after moderates just in the context of oversight with the Trump administration. There's at the very least, the idea is out there in a way that it hasn't been out there before. I don't know if the infrastructure is quite there. We don't have a club for growth at this point. But
there's also an idea of, a lot of these superdelegates might just put their finger in the wind and see which way it's blowing.
Right. That's the other big difference between the nature of the superdelegates that we have today as opposed to 4 years ago or 3 years ago, is that they're more elected. There's a higher concentration of elected officials. Yeah. And so they are, while not directly elected as superdelegates, they will face the voters, and there is an opportunity there for some type of backlash. And so they're going to be more sensitive to those things than like a former dignitary of the Democratic Party who's now like a lobbyist for Raytheon or something. Appreciate the call, John.
All right, thank you.
Bye. Calling from an 814 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. Big fan. But today I'm actually coming to you with some criticism, and I can't disclose my name because the subject matter of what I'm going to be talking about may put me in danger. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into what I want to ask you about. Do you remember the interview that you conducted with a Dr. Juan Cole on the topic of Islam and Islamophobia?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, the criticism that I have for you is that I believe in this interview 2 things happened. Number 1, I believe that Juan misled or lied about the Quran. And number 2, I believe that you didn't know enough about the Quran to correct his mistake, but you still believed it because it fit your agenda. And with that, I believe that you perfectly exemplified the unholy alliance between Islam and liberalism that us ex-Muslims have been trying to expose for a while now. But you wanted to say something, so I'll just let you respond quickly.
I don't pretend to be an expert on the Quran or Islam. So
No, I didn't mean that you were. I didn't mean that you were an expert. I meant that when he brought this idea that I'm going to expose to you right now towards you, you didn't push back on it. You didn't.
I mean,
you didn't
to the
deny
extent,
or accept it.
Right.
So, you know.
To the extent that I have any sort of academic background in this, it was comparative religion and religion as a phenomena in school. But I also wouldn't necessarily. I don't necessarily, tout that because this was many years ago and I was an undergrad. But go ahead. What is your point more specifically?
Okay, so basically 2 minutes and 22 seconds into the video, Juan quotes verse 5 of chapter 9 of the Quran, which is commonly referred to as the verse of the sword. And this verse goes something along the lines of, when sacred months have passed, slay the polytheists wherever you find them. And then he goes on to explain how the polytheists referred to in this verse were a specific group of pagans that were hostile. And then this part of what I just said, he was correct in saying that. But then the lie comes when he concludes by saying the Quran does not advocate killing innocents. So he uses this verse to say that the whole Quran does not advocate killing innocents, all right? This verse is 9:5, chapter 9, verse 5. But what you see is that him being the snake oil salesman that he is, he fails to mention...
Well, hold on for 1 second. Will you do me one favor? Here? Why don't you just make your point without characterizing a renowned professor and scholar of this stuff in the way that you are?
Okay.
All right? Because you're just some dude who won't give me his name on the phone. So you want to make your point, make your point.
Okay, all right. I'll give you that. All right. So basically, he quotes the beginning of that chapter to make which is the verse that I just talked to you about the polytheists. But then he fails to mention verse 29 of that chapter, which says, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and His Messenger have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of the truth from those who are giving the scripture. Fight until they give the jizya, which is compensation, willingly while they are humbled." So the choice is given to you by the Quran as a non-Muslim is to either convert, pay the jizya, which is protection tax, or be fought. So him saying that the Quran doesn't advocate killing of innocents is just completely wrong.
No, wait a second. So you're equating the word fight with the killing of innocents. Because you're aware that on any given day, the number of politicians who in the course of talking about just about any issue say the word fight. Do you equate the killing of innocents when people say we're fighting for a repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act, or we're fighting for a $15 minimum wage? We're not going to give up the struggle. Do you equate that with killing of innocents?
I mean, the options given forth to you are either conversion or giving protection money. And when you look at it historically, what the Muslims did were demand money from you, or make you convert or kill you. That's historical fact. You could see it in.
We're not talking about historical fact. We're talking about the reading of the Quran. Because I can tell you I can tell you that when people say we're going to fight to make abortion illegal in this world, in this country, that historically there have been people who then say, oh, I'm going to go bomb a clinic. I'm going to go kill an abortion doctor. So now, does that rhetoric inflame, particularly when there's knowledge that that's going on? Without a doubt. I don't know the historical context in which that was written in the Quran. But if you're asking me, do people take the words of Bibles and, their various Bibles, as it were, and use those words to justify killing, my answer would be yes. But that is very different. That is very different from saying that is what the intent of the writer was. I don't know how you glean that.
if I could respond to that quickly. When I said historically, I didn't mean historically with random factors within Islam. I'm talking about the Prophet of Islam. He himself applied this verse as I explained it to you, and this is public record. Anybody could look this up. The Prophet himself went and conquested places and gave them the option to either convert or pay jizya or die. And this is also backed up by the hadith. So the history is backing me up of that the Prophet did that. The hadith is saying to do this, and the Quran is also saying to do this. So, I understand what you're saying, that the connotation of the word fight might be different, but when all these three match, when the hadith, the Quran, and the Prophet himself did what I said that he did.
No. Where is it? Where is the proof that Muhammad, that this historical fact that you're talking about? Where can I find this?
If you can look, you can find it in the Sirah which is the life story of the Prophet. There's public, within Islamic records, there's a list of all the conquests that the Prophet has done. So within those, you can see where he goes to tribes and he invades and gives them the option of either converting, paying money, or dying. This is public record. You can look.
Well, I'm looking at public record too. I mean, listen, I'm looking at public record as well, and the first thing I find is is about Muhammad killing innocents, and saying these are the most common contemporary allegations levied against the Prophet Muhammad. It's also one of the most spurious. And so what I do is I turn to someone who has spent literally decades studying these things. Now, maybe he has a secret agenda, but I mean,
it's just that I grew up over there. I lived over there my whole life.
Great.
These people, I grew up in the Middle East my whole life. These people do this stuff. They read this stuff. It's preached.
What about Muslims here?
What
about Muslims here?
I'm sorry?
What about Muslims in the United States?
Yeah, but that's less than 1% of Muslims worldwide.
Well, I mean, what percent of Muslims are you talking about? I mean, what you're talking about, okay, is you're saying that you grew up in a specific context where there was
Sunni Muslim.
Okay, you grew up in a specific context. In what country?
I grew up in the United Arab Emirates, which is supposed to be moderate, but these ideas are still widely circulated. And within all the Arabic countries that I've been to Somalia, I've been to Sudan, I've been to Egypt, been to UAE, Saudi, all these Sunni countries. I'll specifically say the word Sunni so I don't imply that all of Islam is a monolith. But within all these countries, you can go into the mosque and then you pick up this book.
So
Quran,
even just by your
and
own.
Let me finish that one point. This is very critical. In all these countries, you could pick up the Quran that says that, and then you could also pick up the Hadith book, which confirms that.
Yeah, dude, so I could walk into any temple around the world, okay, and pick up Numbers, one of the 5 books of Moses, and learn how I should be stoning women when they have their periods.
And that's terrible.
Yes, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. But no one would ever describe the essence of this. And that was, when I'm saying numbers, I mean, this is specific stuff. This is not somebody has the ability to interpret this stuff. These are specific, rules. Literally, Numbers is the census, and it comes with a bunch of rules, which we would find absolutely grotesque today in society today.
That's terrible.
Right.
But
you tell me the story.
You
tell me the story, right, in Islam, that people have interpreted the words fight as meaning killing innocents, and you suggest that it's completely public record.
Has backed it up.
I'm sorry? And the commentary has backed it up. The commentary has backed it up. And I can tell you the commentary also in the Midrash backs up a lot of these very, very specific rules. But the interpretation of these things. So, and you cite evidence that's so publicly available that an expert in Islam for decades missed it somehow.
Well, even if he's an expert, he still has a viewpoint. So
Right.
I feel like
So that
he
evidence
didn't
is not
say
so
that.
clear, obviously, right? Or are you just saying that he's completely
Well,
corrupt?
I'm not saying anything about him. I'm saying. What
Oh no,
he
no.
lacked
Excuse
mention.
me. I am not so old that I can't remember 3 minutes ago when you said he was a snake oil salesman. Now that is far less
Well,
up. That is
true.
far
You got me
less up
there,
to interpretation.
I'm trying to focus on the content.
Well,
I'm trying to
you
focus
did
on the content
a crap
of this
ass
verse.
job of it. Okay, so I'll tell you what. You send me an email with the citations that you're talking about, and
Well, okay.
yeah.
Well, this is not for you. Anybody can look this up, okay?
Well, I mean, anybody. I just told you about that. I looked at.
I'll get into it right now.
No.
Okay, listen. Verse 29.
Send it.
Dude, I'm very sorry for
chapter-
your personal
honestly,
trauma, but I
I
mean,
don't-
the world is not just your
and the
background.
hadith, and the hadith,
trauma.
and,
Sorry.
and you can go
Bye.
and look at the historical battles. That
Dude,
the
anybody
Prophet
can
had.
look up for
Those are the
themselves
three.
stuff in any
Yeah, that's
of
what I'm
these
saying. I want people-
ancient
I want
books.
people to look it up. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. Great. People. That's the point of the call. I mean, look it up. But I mean,
It's time to
what,
exit
what
YouTube,
you're
dude.
what you're talking about. I mean, look, you gave the game away when you came in. You said this guy was a snake oil salesman and you said it specifically
I
calls
guess I got a little
for.
bit
Excuse me.
emotional
You said it
because, this has to
specifically
do with my
calls.
life.
Excuse me. You said it specifically calls for the killing of innocents. The word killing is not in there. The word innocence is not in there. The word fighting is.
What does? Okay, yes, the word fighting is in there, but once you go into the hadith,
Right,
and the
I
life story
understand.
of the
If you
Prophet,
if
they
you
both
take
confirm that.
a decoder ring, you can look at that word as killing innocents. But if we don't have the decoder ring that you have, that's not what it says.
Okay, well,
Appreciate the
if you
call.
go into Sahih Bukhari, if you go into Sahih.
Okay, appreciate the call. Honestly, you want to come and you want to make an argument that Islam, like every other religion, not every other religion, maybe the Mani Codex, although I don't know, but most of the world's religions have been used as a leverage point to kill. Certainly Christianity helped with the genocide in this country of indigenous people, and I would imagine indigenous people all around the world. Certainly Christianity was not a total bystander to things like the Holocaust. Certainly we have examples of Buddhism that have led to
Shut your
killings.
mouth. Don't ever
I mean,
insult Buddhism.
We have seen this with all religions. And to make this leap from fighting to killing innocents so casually and say that someone who interprets fighting as not killing innocents is a snake oil salesman, I think you give away the game. I'm not negating your experience, but I think maybe your assessment and your analysis of your experience is not necessarily fully equipped you from making this type of. I can understand having the resentment. I mean, no doubt. If I had grown up, I mean, there's a lot of people who come out of, let's say, the Hasidic communities, to the extent that they come out, and there's a lot of resentment there
One's
too.
personal trauma cannot dictate how you approach the politics and culture of over 1 billion people. And the incredible irony of, like, this is a good lesson in the limits of standpoint epistemology and identity politics. Like, right-wing people who will not take anybody's word for anything with their experience of, like, racism as an example, outsource, like, oh, well, Islam, we've got a couple of, like, translated quotes, and this person had a bad experience growing up, so done.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, I'm not negating his
No, I know you're
experience
not.
of
Nobody
Islam
is.
and
Nobody
the
is.
context he
Growing
grew
up
up
in a religious fanatic household of any kind, let alone a government on those principles, is super unpleasant. We oppose it. It's just he wants to make a global statement out of it and also undermine somebody's legitimate scholarship. That's the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, people think that we give short shrift to the damage done by certain kinds of religious fundamentalism because we're all, in our coastal elite bubble. Most of us were not raised by religious fundamentalists, but, like, I think they miss the more nuanced point that we're making, which is that, like, yes, religious fundamentalism has caused harm and people have grown up in abusive situations, but what causes the religious fundamentalism is not simply the religion itself. It's not the text itself. It always relies on so many other factors, social, political, psychological, etc. So the way to combat the harms done by religious fundamentalism is not by combating the religion itself, because that's such a nebulous thing to begin with. It's always the political, I think.
And also just the situational reality that, like, if you take on Sunni fundamentalism in a country where that is in control is entirely different than in a state that monitors and spies on people and bombs them overseas. Like, there's just a total contextual difference on that kind of discourse, depending literally on the geography of it. Sorry.
Let's go. Let's have a palate cleanser and hear from the exquisite First Lady of this country, who is out there really encouraging people to be their best, ladies and gentlemen. That's what's so important in this time. Be your best. And here is First Lady of the United States encouraging all of us to be our best. Here she is, Melania Trump.
Throughout this past year, I've had opportunity to work with many of you, traveling both domestically and internationally in order to promote the 3 pillars of Be Best: well-being, online safety, and opioid abuse.
Now, I don't want to get picky, but Virgil, what do you think about this? The 3 pillars of being Be Best. One of them including you should abuse opioids. How would this work?
Well, I'm agnostic on the opioid abuse thing, but I generally oppose the Be Best priority. How will the next generation develop the trolling skills they need to compete in a global digital marketplace if they're being told not to harass their classmates?
I mean, that's a great point. I'm sitting right here as you say that, actually, and I am looking at a New York Times piece from just yesterday, A New Age of Warfare, How Internet Mercenaries Do Battle for Authoritarian Governments. How are we going to fight authoritarian governments, or support them for that matter, if we don't encourage online trolling from our kids at an early age?
No, we're going to be whipped. We're going to be this next generation. We're too old to fight in the digital wars. You know, as we're all approaching, they're going to have to pick up the slack, and they can't be a bunch of grass eaters. You know,
maybe that's what Melania wants. You know. Because the people most susceptible to this kind of message are probably bleeding heart liberals, and if they don't raise their kids to fight, the authoritarian right online, they win.
Not the greatest messenger. I mean, I think she's just looking for a total disarmament by the United States in the coming digital warfare.
Is exactly what her husband is trying to do with NATO.
This is like
it is the digital NATO.
Denatification. Here is Donald Trump, her husband. He is signing or I should say, after a signing of an executive order that would deal with the crisis that we have on our campuses of.
Thank you, Weinstein brothers.
Of invitations to right-wing speakers, and of course, I'm being facetious. There is every reason to believe that this is not a real crisis, that it almost decidedly could not be a crisis, almost definitionally. But it just so happens that 2018 was one of the lowest years of disinvitations over in a decade. But be that as it may, here's Donald Trump, and I don't think this executive order is even constitutional. When you talk about protecting free speech, this seems to be fundamentally an assault on free speech. Here is Donald Trump, clip number 3.
Today we're delivering a clear message to the professors and power structures trying to suppress dissent and keep young Americans, and all Americans, not just young Americans, like Ellen and Caitlin and Polly, from challenging rigid far-left ideology. People who are confident in their beliefs do not censor others. We don't want to censor others. They welcome free, fair, and open debate, and that's what we're demanding. Under the policy I am announcing today, federal agencies will use their authority under various grant-making programs to ensure that public universities protect, cherish, protect the First Amendment and First Amendment rights of their students, or risk losing billions and billions of dollars of federal taxpayer dollars. Every year, the federal government provides educational institutions with more than $35 billion in research funding. All of that money is now at stake. That's a lot of money. They are going to not have to like your views a lot, right? We will not stand idly by and allow public institutions to violate their students' constitutional rights. If a college or university doesn't allow you to speak, we will not give them money. It's very simple.
Now, I want to take this seriously for a moment because
It's serious.
in what possible instance is there a college where they say you cannot speak? Like what? I'm trying to even think of like what would constitute that type of violation.
How I interpret it, it's usually when some college conservative group invites a Nazi to come speak, like Richard Spencer or something. Which, as far as I know, has any college actually ever, administration ever actually stopped Richard Spencer from speaking?
I don't know that you can stop him from speaking. You can say like, hey, we're not going to make available to you the Blandon Hall, and we're not going to provide AV services for you, and we're not going to pay you money to come and speak. It's conceivable that in certain instances, like, hey, we can't provide security for this, so we don't want it to happen on campus. But these are not first of all, these are not their students, right? Like other speakers. But every single day in the Social Activities Council, they're saying, we're not going to book Todd Barry. I want to book Tom Rhodes. Like, could Tom Barry, Todd Barry, could Jello Biafra sue all these people because he hasn't gotten a booking at certain college? Like, I don't understand what is the free speech principle here? Like, how are these people preventing any speech?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to my knowledge, there's no college that has, built into its rules and regulations some line that says, by the way, here's the views you can't express.
Yeah, it's very strange. This calculation of free speech that go. I mean, I think you can't discriminate, on channels that are open to everyone, right? Like if you have, you couldn't deny maybe certain groups from being there unless they were considered maybe full-on hate speech or could be inciting in their presence. But I'm not quite sure I understand even the dynamic, but what it does is it lays down some type of fake predicate, right? Yeah. Like this is going to be cited as a way of pulling funds. And really now what we're going to see is the government is going to use its funds to force speech on schools. And we already know in the Supreme Court, they've already ruled, this is what the whole Janus case is about. You cannot force, you cannot use your power to force speech. And that is what supposedly was the basis of the Janus case. You can't take money to a union where money is fungible, even if it's paying for their lawyers, because that frees up other money for them to go out and engage in political speech.
Well, I just looked it up, and colleges have canceled appearances by Richard Spencer in particular, usually due to safety concerns.
Safety concerns,
right. I just looked up the University of Florida canceled his appearance due to safety concerns.
Not out of a specific policy.
Yeah, so what this order would do, basically, is to say, screw your safety concerns. You're going to have this event anyway, regardless of the potential violence that ensues, or else you're going to lose your funding.
Well, I'm less concerned about that, to be honest, than the broader implications that it might lead into. Because I remember when David Horowitz was going around college campuses when I was an undergraduate. He was a madman, crazy person with it. Basically, his parents were Stalinists, and his whole life was reacting against them and getting funded by right-wing sugar daddies. And he had a thing called it was something like the Academic Bill of Rights, and essentially it was a demand on what professors could not say or express in class. So I think way bigger than like who comes on campus or doesn't is the implications of this for people who might hold. Well, Juan Cole's a good example.
Well, I was just going to say, Professor Juan
There
Cole was up for a position, a tenured position, and I think it was Yale.
That was at Yale.
And it was, I don't know if it was AIPAC specifically, but it was certainly those type of folks who basically, after he had already been, I think, offered the job
in hand.
Forced the school to roll back their offer to him. And so, I mean, this is...
and Horowitz was, just to be clear, like, it was super specific. Like, I wouldn't go anywhere, like, but my friend Ben Burgess is an example, right? He makes a point. He's like, I teach logic. I don't necessarily express my politics in class. But which, you know, whatever, give or take, doesn't matter. I think anybody should be able to express their political preferences when they teach. I think that's fine. It certainly made learning from people more interesting. But the stuff Horowitz was trying to get to was, like, literally, like, teaching that objective facts, like the Constitution was an objectively pro-slavery document until it was changed. That's a leftist opinion,
right,
versus an objective historical and legal reality. So the game here is that, and it's going to be serious for public educators at universities and the all-powerful humanities departments, which, as we all know, dominate modern higher education.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump also expressed his real concern about the student debt crisis in this country. As you know, Donald Trump intimately aware of this issue of student loan debt. Well, not so much student loan debt, more like debt. And so far, debt has been pretty good to this guy. Let's listen in.
Today's action is just the beginning of our efforts to protect free speech and advance our students' rights agenda. What I've been witnessing over the last long period of time, long before I became president, what I've been witnessing is outrageous. This order will also empower students with vital information about the value of the programs they take on and having to do with debt, student loan debt. I'm going to work to fix it because it's outrageous what's happening. You're not given that fair start. You're too far down. It's not right. And we're going to work very, very hard to get it fixed. But we're going to start with 43 million people in the United States are currently working to pay off student loans. And we'll be talking about that very soon. We're going to work on that very soon. I've always been very good with loans, and I love loans. I love other people's money. We're going to work on it.
Well, as a victim of student loans, I find that both extremely funny and terrifying because I know when they look at it, they're going to find a way of making people in mine and much worse situations' lives even much more difficult.
We're going to double how profitable these loans are to us.
There's a lot of it because they're getting hosed by these private companies, but there's so much being left on the table in terms of interest rates.
We got a new plan. Here's the plan. We're going to have your loan. We're going to have your interest, but all the money is going to go to my family.
Yeah. It's called the Trump
Trump
value.
Jubilee.
It's called the Trump University. We're going to bring that back. And you learn to not take
I
notes.
sort of feel like he's insincere on his agenda to tackle the student loan issue.
It's the first time hearing about it.
I feel like it's probably an insincere.
He's going to need to wheel out some fake populism issues that he can pretend in 2020 on after, totally lying, obviously, about Medicare and Social Security.
All right, we just have about 8 or 9 minutes left here. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
Mindy, how are you? What's on your mind, Mindy?
Hi. I have absolutely nothing to say except I just wanted to be the last caller, and I wanted to hear you say, this is the last call of the day.
I'm sorry, it is not.
Ooh.
I know. So should I hang up and call back till I'm the last call of the day?
You will be number 28th in the queue, so I will probably not get to you.
Oh, you could get to her.
But
if I was hosting, I'd do that for you, Mindy.
I know. Thank you. 2 things else I want to say. I love Virgil, Texas. Every time he's on, I just love him.
Oh, that's true. I remember that
and I
now.
follow him.
I remember that
love
last time.
him, and yeah, he's great. And the guy you had on the other day, the psychiatrist, what was his name?
Johan Hari?
Oh, I was glued. I thought he was amazing. It was like
He's not a
the
psychiatrist.
story that he told.
He writes about psychiatry.
Yeah. Well, what is he? He's just what is
He's
he?
a writer. He's a journalist.
He's just great. I just love him.
Oh, all right.
So I thought that was one of the best interviews you had. And I'm sorry I'm not the last call of the week, but what can you do? I'll try next week.
Appreciate it, Mindy. Better luck next time. Calling from
Thanks,
a 478 area code. She was all over Twitter last time, like really singing your praises last time you were on. Calling from 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, hello. Giving you my name would, of course, put my life in extreme danger, but I don't care about that. This is Jeff from Georgia, Sam.
Oh, Jeff from Georgia. How are you?
Nice.
Got all the regulars got in early today. What's on your mind, Jeff?
Hey, man, I did my best. I'm a big fan. Hey, we'll say real quick, I'm also a big Virgil fan. I was pleased to take a little photo with you when I was up in Brooklyn. Virgil, it's great to see you on the show. Keep up the great work, man.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to say real quick about I want to talk a little about Stacey Abrams.
Sure.
Who's from my neck of the woods. And, I'm sure everybody saw the story that just floated out about Biden and, just publicly musing about choosing her as a vice president. I like what you guys had to say about that. And I got to confess to you that, when I first read that headline a few days ago, I actually thought it was a pretty positive thing. I was like, oh, okay, well, at least he's fainting, if not actually moving to the left. And Stacey Abrams is a fine politician for Georgia. She would have made a fine governor. She should be the governor. If it was up to me, she'd be withdrawing into the hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains and armed compound or whatever, setting up a government exile. But that's just not how we do things, I guess. But the more I thought about it, the more it really kind of pisses me off. I haven't heard a whole lot from her camp about how into this potential pick that she is into, and the more I think about it, the more it does strike me as a really disingenuous move by a man whose politics are really quite bad.
Yep.
To cover them up, and to use a much better human being than him to do so, which is really quite a shameful thing to do on a human level. It's not really about his politics. I wouldn't go vote for him anyway. But I just urge everyone, this is not a very lucid point, I guess, but not to fall for that bullshit.
Well, and here's the thing. We will never know. I mean, it's possible you may hear whispers if you were, we will never know, because there's no way that she can come out and publicly criticize him if she wants support from any type of institutional support going forward or any type of donors. There's no way that she can come out and criticize him. There's no way she can come out and say that's why they do this. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. It's just not, and I find it very unlikely that she sees any value in it. I don't think that this is something where they would come do you mind us floating your name? And she's go ahead. I just it doesn't make sense. There's no value to her to be tied to Joe Biden.
I absolutely agree with you. Her politics, really, just to be frank with everyone, they're not as she's not. Her and I are not the same politically. I'm fought her
Well,
left.
she's
I'm sure a lot of
but
this
for
audience
a
fought her
for a
left.
statewide,
but she is.
right,
She's
right.
not dumb.
Right. And
She's not dumb. You know, she knows how to make political calculations. She's a minority leader in the Georgia State Senate, among other things, right? Like she's no fool. I hope that she knows that she's being used, or attempting to be used.
I imagine she does, and I imagine she realizes there's only so much she can do about it. And she's probably sitting around with advisors right now, going like, "How can we turn this into something that's going to benefit me down the road in some fashion or another?" But yeah, I mean, she's got really good Georgia politics, for Georgia statewide office, and so good for her. But I appreciate the call, Jeff. Thank you for telling us your name. All right, I think we get time for one more call. Calling from an 810 area code. We have literally 6 people who have been on hold for 70 minutes. And your name on 810 is?
Hey, this is Joe.
And you're calling
This is
from?
Joe from Flint.
Joe from Flint.
Michigan.
What's on your mind, Joe?
Hey, I was wondering, I've been waiting a long time to ask this, but is there any way to get kind of an education of conservatives, like buying a commercial on Fox News where they show how Bregman schooled Carlson and make people aware that he's a fake populist who's like a millionaire trust fund baby from Swanson Foods?
I mean, you could. I imagine you could buy on Google, on YouTube. You could buy ads with something like that, but you could never get it on Fox News.
But the other point I wanted to make was I can't believe we're in 2019 and they haven't automated redistricting to make it fair and impartial.
Who's they?
Why is there? I haven't heard anybody talking about an algorithm that will automatically
an algorithm
pop people into districts.
Well,
and that seems like the
listen.
most sensible solution.
Weapons of Math Destruction.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to read that book.
But even if there was an algorithm, that's not the issue. The issue isn't that you can't make these districts fair in some fashion.
Right, they don't want to give up the power.
Yeah, the
Whoever
issue
happens to
is
be
that
in
the
charge of drawing it.
Supreme
Right.
Court, and they're just about to do it again. In Wisconsin, you had 54% of the vote went to Democrats, and Republicans control 64 out of, I think, less than 100 seats in their assembly. And that is not a math problem. That is a political problem. And the Supreme Court is not going to allow us to fix it. H.R. 1, presented by the Democrats in Congress, would have tackled it. But I appreciate the call. Thanks. Michigan's also a crap show with that. All right, folks. That was the last call of the day. Virgil, any closing words that you want to offer us?
Yeah. So when I was originally going to come on last week, but something came up, and I was hoping to talk about my run-in with the Yang Gang, but sadly that's not a novelty anymore because it seems more and more people have skirmished with these ruffians.
Indeed.
Well, tell us who the Yang Gang is.
These are online supporters of Andrew Yang, and a substantial number of them come from the alt-right. Come from, the 4chan, 8chan, places like that, who were, or at least claimed to be, Trump supporters. But they're like, the alt-right is, these aren't, people with, real values that reflect the structural issues in this country. They're just kind of like, bored young suburbanites.
Right. And so, wait, does Andrew Yang have any support from, like, actual voters who would normally vote in the Democratic primary?
It's an online phenomenon right now, so it's as near as I can tell, and of course the Yang Gang, like their voices are much louder. It's like it's young people. It's specifically you want to profile. It's a young male NEET
nerds.
Young male NEET?
NEET, N-E-E-T, not in education, employment, or training. I think that was originally a British term, but it's what you describe your average fail son.
Fail sons, yeah.
Oh, I see.
A lot of our listeners.
Right, of course.
And all of the reactions when we put up our first video on Yang on TMBS, and like the whole template on Twitter and on YouTube is exactly the same as Sam Harris, which is, this is totally unfair. You haven't researched enough. Can't believe you did this. totally wrong. Some sort of like the line between, hey, can you research my candidate and talk about him a little bit more, versus like the just total emotional inability to deal with the fact that maybe you just other people disagree with your guy is like non-existent line there.
My colleagues have talked about Yang as a candidate before. I haven't really spoken about him yet. The thing is, my run-in, I never said anything unsolicitous to Andrew Yang. I just asked him to pick up a copy of the Chapo Guide to Revolution, a manifesto against logic, facts, and reason. And he said he would read it, actually. So I'm excited for that. He didn't like send me an address to send him a copy, but as you know, you can buy this book at bookstores nationwide.
That's my understanding.
And then I get all these replies from the Yang gang, telling me to fuck off
because you're asking him to read.
Yeah, because I'm asking him to read.
Interesting.
Well, they're not stupid. They understand what's going on.
But this is all digital. You have not been.
I've not been physically accosted, but I spend most of my time in the digital realm. So this is the equivalent of doing literal violence to my person.
To my person.
But obviously, we're out of time, and hopefully in the future I can kind of talk about this more because increasingly people are talking about the UBI, and there's a lot of aspects about that. Right now, the conversation is just about the Yang Gang and this becoming an online phenomenon akin to the Bernie Bros or the Ron Paul people. Or yes, the Trump original, MAGA Groyper Pepe heads. I do want to say that I'm calling right now on your show for a temporary ceasefire, a non-aggression pact, hopefully a more durable non-aggression pact between the Bernie Bros and the Yang Gang. I don't think that that right now at this time we can have any sort of productive conversation or that there is anything to be gained from this fight. Of course, the Bernie Bros were fighting against the DNC in 2016. The Yang Gang now will probably have to come into conflict with the DNC if Tom Perez says, Andrew Yang, you can't debate.
Interesting.
In the future, I mean, obviously there are strong disagreements on the issue of UBI, even if that seems like a redistributive program. Yang is not a redistributionist. He's not a socialist or anything like that. But in the short term, I think we should put our knives away, focus on shared opponents. There's nothing to be gained from harassing each other in this fashion.
There you go. So if you were thinking about going out and harassing a Yang Gang member, just put
Gandhi
it in park
of Twitter.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Is that what you're saying?
Is my Yang?
Not necessarily.
All right.
So we need a yin to the yang, is what you're saying.
Ooh.
All right,
Oh shit.
To be continued.
All right, folks. See you Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the rope that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know